this voicemail, and also it looks like we're not streaming on YouTube yet. That's don't know why that is. So let's make sure that that's happening. And looks like we're good. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and play this voicemail that we got from somebody about a climate event. Let's listen to this.
Well, why he finds that voicemail, I just want to encourage folks to do that throughout the week. Leave us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR. It's a good way for you to get the word out about whatever's going on, whether it's an event or, an action coming up or just, some kind of development happening in your community, in your union. We love to hear these dispatches, especially from folks in the South, but not exclusively. Wherever you're coming from, we love to hear what's going on.
Yeah, think we got that voicemail. Let's play that.
Hi, Adam and Jacob, and all the listeners of the Valley Labor Report. This is Debbie in Huntsville. I'm a member of IATSE Local 900 and a former member of the Progressive Workers Union. I'm also a volunteer community organizer and a climate activist with Citizens Climate Lobby in Huntsville. So I'm calling on April 22nd, so happy Earth Day. I want to let this community know about an advocacy training that our chapter is holding in the afternoon of Saturday, May 10th at the downtown Huntsville Library. So CCL is a nonpartisan and bipartisan organization. We build political will by empowering breakthroughs in personal and political power for climate change. And CCL teaches citizens like us how to organize and build the power that we need so that decision makers, whether they're your union leaders, your business owners, or your legislators, so that they're compelled to listen to us. I think there's a lot of things that idealistic people wish would happen, but the reality is that much of the time you need enough power to be a credible ally or a credible threat. So come on May 10th, we'll introduce you to CCL and what we do. We'll teach you skills for advocating with your elected officials. And finally, we're going to end with a mock lobbying session, so you'll get to practice your newfound skills. It's a beginner-friendly training. If you're a new activist, if you're a seasoned organizer, if you're conservative, if you're progressive, we welcome you at our training. So you can find out more information and register at climatehuntsville.eventbrite.com. And I'm looking forward to meeting you there. Thanks so much, guys.
All right. Appreciate it so much, Debbie. Thank you for the call.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate my union sister, Debbie, committed, passionate environmental advocate here in the area, and always encourage folks to get trained on advocacy because, it takes everyday, ordinary people like yourself, like us. It takes us getting involved to make a difference. Politicians and power brokers, they hear from other powerful people all the time. They hear from wealthy lobbyists all the time. They need to hear from regular folks like us. And yeah, I appreciated the climate emphasis as well. It is the week of Earth Day, and this week on the Valley Labor Report, we're honoring Earth Day the union way by talking about how the labor movement and the environmental movement go hand in hand. Earth Day is a workers' day too, because here's the truth. If we want to build a just, sustainable future, we've got to make sure working people are at the center of it, not left behind. Corporate greed is at the heart of the climate crisis and environmental issues broadly. The economic elites and their politician allies have decided that the pursuit of profit in the short term is more important than preserving our planet in the long term. We've previously interviewed Matthew Huber about his book, Climate Change as Class War, and I think his title says a lot. Climate change and other assaults on our environment, from poisoning of our air, land, and water, to deforestation and reckless resource extraction, ultimately these are attacks on the working class. It's us and our children and our grandchildren who bear the brunt. If we're going to talk about Earth Day, let's acknowledge the basic fact that capitalism is destroying our global ecosystem. If we're going to reverse course, or hell, at this point, just mitigate the damage, it will take organized worker power. It's up to us as a working class to secure a just transition away from fossil fuels and towards a sustainable future. Take the so-called green economy. Politicians love to throw that term around, but too often what they really mean is lower wages, non-union contractors, and broken promises in communities like ours. That's why many unions are calling for a real just transition. For example, the IBEW supports federal legislation that would incentivize employers to keep displaced fossil fuel workers working. Seems pretty modest, honestly. That means no more sacrificing people for policy. A real transition has to protect jobs, pensions, and entire towns. It's not just the morally right thing to do, it's how we win. We've talked to Jeremy Brecker and others about a Green New Deal, which has now become a sort of demonized phrase, but has also been used as a catch-all phrase to refer to the need for a massive federal jobs and infrastructure investment to deal with the environmental crisis, like we saw in the 1930s and 40s in response to the Great Depression and World War II. It's understandable that workers in dirty sectors like fossil fuels would be skeptical. We've already seen how manufacturing was hollowed out in part by free trade deals like NAFTA. And, throughout that time, politicians made a lot of promises when it comes to creating jobs, when it comes to retraining and all of the great opportunities that were going to come with this. So we keep hearing that green jobs are the future, and that might be true, and I hope it is true. But right now, many of these jobs at EV plants, solar companies, and battery factories are non-union, underpaid, and highly exploited. That's why the UAW is organizing electric vehicle plants across the South, because shouldn't a green job also be a good job? Environmental injustice and labor injustice often go hand in hand. The same working class communities that get hit hardest by pollution and climate disasters are also the ones with the worst wages and working conditions. I appreciate the Labor Network for Sustainability and their effort at building a powerful labor climate movement to secure an ecologically sustainable and economically just future from the ground up. From poultry plants to auto plants, from the shop floor to the shoreline, it's all connected. And it's not just about long-term climate. It's about what workers are already facing right now. Here in the South, more and more workers are dealing with extreme heat, dangerous storms, and environmental hazards on the job. Farm workers, warehouse workers, sanitation workers, construction workers, they're already on the front lines of climate change. But we don't even have a national heat standard from OSHA. That's deadly. And it's why we need unions to push for real workplace protections. Now let's be clear, this isn't a new fight. Labor has always fought for clean air, safe workplaces, and public health. Unions were pushing for stronger environmental laws long before Earth Day became a national holiday. From the coal fields to the chemical plants, it was union members who blew the whistle, organized for clean water, and demanded safer conditions. Think about asbestos, right? Here's how the United Electrical Workers put it. UE encourages the union at all levels to educate members about climate change and creative solutions that reduce carbon output while creating good union jobs. That's the labor movement at its best, fighting for our communities and not just our contracts. So what does this all mean for us here in the South, right here in Alabama? It means we need stronger ties between labor and climate justice movements. It means building coalitions that include workers, faith groups, climate advocates, and communities who are just fighting to survive. The Blue-Green Alliance says it plainly. Our policies must support high labor and environmental standards throughout the clean energy supply chain. That's what we should be demanding from lawmakers, from companies, and from each other. This Earth Day, let's remember, you can't have climate justice without worker justice. And any transition that doesn't include the people doing the work isn't a transition. It's an eviction. So let's keep building that working class environmental movement. Let's organize, let's fight, and let's make sure the South rises with both feet, green and union strong.
Absolutely. I believe that we have Robyn Hyden on the line. Is that right?
Yes, good morning.
All
Good to see
right,
you, Jacob.
great. Yeah, great to have you on, Robyn. Robyn Hyden is the executive director for Alabama Arise. Alabama Arise is a statewide progressive nonprofit advocacy organization. They do great work advocating for poor and working folks down in Montgomery. Robyn, welcome back to the program. Really appreciate it.
It's great to be with you always.
It's great to have you. As listeners probably know, the session is rounding down. We have about 6 legislative days left, I think. So what is from your in your view, what are some of the highlights from the session, and what should we be looking for during these last 6 legislative days?
Well, good news, we're actually down to only 5 days left in the Alabama legislature, which is for those of us who lobby or watch what's going on, great news.
Yes.
I will say this has been an interesting session for people who fight for working folks. There have been a couple highlights. One is the legislature passed a bill to cover paid maternal and parental leave to all state employees and teachers. That was something that incredibly did not exist before this year. So when that goes into effect, it will be 8 weeks of paid maternity leave, 2 weeks of paid paternity leave for new parents. The second piece of news is that, we also had some maternal health legislation to make it easier for pregnant moms and pregnant people to get access to health insurance earlier in their pregnancy, which improves health outcomes and prenatal care. The bad news is, unfortunately, our lawmakers are continuing to prioritize expensive tax giveaways to people who don't need them. The first of those is the CHOOSE Act. This is a bill that diverted millions of dollars of our taxes, the taxes that you and I pay to the Education Trust Fund, sales taxes and income taxes. They actually diverted those into tax rebates for people who have their kids in private school. This year, they're trying to extend those by an additional $40 million. We think that's a terrible way to spend our money. Meanwhile, they're letting the grocery tax cut, which was supposed to go into effect over 2 years, continue to lag behind. So in the last 5 days of the session, Arise is really going to be urging everybody in this listening area, everyone in the state of Alabama, call your senator and say, why aren't y'all cutting the grocery tax? This was a commitment that was made 2 years ago. We know that the money is there if you're able to divert our tax dollars to corporate tax giveaways, to private school vouchers, but you're unable to cut the grocery tax by another cent. So going into the final weeks of session, this is something we're really looking to see.
Now, on the grocery tax cut, I'm sorry, on the grocery tax cut, I thought that had already passed. Did it pass one house or?
It did. It came out of the House. So
okay, but it never passed the Senate.
What's funny is that there's a basket where they put bills that come out of one house. They have to be taken out of the basket and brought to the other house. And that didn't happen for weeks and weeks. The House passed this grocery tax cut and it was just sitting in the basket. So thankfully, the bill has been moved over to the Senate as of Thursday, and we're just waiting on our senators to act on it. So they need to feel that urgency. Next year, your state House representative, your state senator, they're going to be coming to you and asking you to vote for them. And you need to ask them, what have you done for me lately? Have you been looking out for the little guy, or have you been fighting for big business in your backyard? Because there's other opportunities to look out for the little guy. One of those is a bill that would take away state tax incentives from companies that are bad actors, companies that are supporting human trafficking, companies that are hiring child labor. There are auto suppliers in our state who have been found guilty of employing child labor, very unsafe working conditions, and they should be held accountable. We shouldn't be sending our tax dollars to support these industries that are not actually providing good jobs for adult workers in Alabama.
And at least that one that you were mentioning about child labor, that's SB 22, and we've been trying to follow that relatively closely. And SB 22, unfortunately, I think in my view, it wouldn't automatically revoke tax incentives from employers who violate child labor law, but it would allow the Department of Revenue to have that as an option, which right now it's not really, right. It's not part of the package deal, and that should at least be an option that the state can exercise. And right now it's not, and so SB 22 really is kind of in my view, like the floor of what should be acceptable as far as the strings that we attach to these public dollars, which are just huge amounts of investment that we are putting as the people of Alabama into these big employers. SB 22, it did pass the Senate relatively. I mean, it was relatively uncontroversial. Like, I don't even know if anybody voted against it. I mean, it was bipartisan. Lots of people, most senators obviously voted for it if it passed. And so where is that?
I believe it's actually passed out of committee in the House. So are just waiting for it to get on the House calendar. So that's another issue that if you want to contact your state representative, your House member, and let them know you strongly support SB 22, there should be more accountability. Our lawmakers talk a lot about accountability for people who receive public benefit. This is a tremendous public benefit that we are paying corporations to locate here. In theory, we're paying them to hire Alabama workers and to provide good pay and good conditions. There needs to be some measuring stick and some accountability for that. So I am excited, though. That's a bill from Senator Marika Coleman Evans, and it is very close to final passage if we can get it on the House calendar.
How does it look as far as getting on the House calendar? Are you anticipating it being put on the House calendar?
Unfortunately, I think what we're seeing right now are a lot of divisions. So it is going to be tough to get any bill from a Democrat on the calendar for either the House or the Senate. The House and the Senate have conflict with each other. Democrats and Republicans have conflict with each other. There are conflicts within the Senate among various senators. So, it's a matter of they're going to prioritize what they perceive their voters prioritizing. I would encourage you to maybe talk to and if you live in a district with one of the leaders of the House, Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter, let them know that this should be a priority because we have tried for several years to move this legislation ahead.
On education, you mentioned, I think that the CHOOSE Act was going to be expanding. Can you talk to us some about that?
Yeah, I honestly feel like Adam knows about this more than I do, but the CHOOSE Act was huge bill last year that extended tax rebates for parents who are sending their kids to private schools or homeschool. And the research has now shown about a year into the program, the vast majority of people who got that tax rebate were already paying for private school. So the school, quote, so-called school choice advocates who are claiming this would expand choice for people. One, we're finding a lot of districts do not have a private school. Two, those that do, the cost is so prohibitive that only people who are already very well off are able to afford that school for their kids. And essentially, this is just a huge tax giveaway to people who don't need tax relief. They don't need a tax break. Our taxes in Alabama are already slanted towards the wealthy. We already overtax working class and low income people by relying too heavily on sales taxes. Our income taxes are basically flat. So, whether you're making $15,000 a year or $150,000 a year, you pay the same percentage in income taxes. Actually, the wealthier person probably gets more tax breaks than the poorer person at the state level. And this is another way that we're fundamentally taking from people who can't afford it to give to people who don't need the help. So when we look at the decisions they're making, when they're saying, oh, we can't afford to continue to cut grocery taxes, this is why, because of decisions to give more tax dollars to their constituents who have kids in private school.
There are a lot of moves across the South to try to lower the income tax, and there's been some agitation around that in Alabama, particularly like from talk radio people. And can you just explain, you mentioned that Alabama's tax system is regressive in no small part because we have such a reliance on the sales tax, as opposed to an income tax or a property tax. And so, the property tax is I think it is so low, if I'm remembering right, that if you doubled it, it would still be the lowest in the country. I mean, it's like crazy. But can you explain that dynamic? Because if somebody here, I'm not sure that everybody understands exactly like why is a sales tax more regressive than even like a flat income tax, which is basically what we have, in the state of Alabama.
Sure. So it's important to know, first of all, that the way that most states think of their tax system, it's a three-legged stool, and you want it to be equally as reliant on sales taxes, income taxes, and property taxes. Well, Alabama's stool is already very wonky because our property tax leg of the stool is so short. We undertax large landowners, timber owners, a lot of corporate property. And as a result, we have to make up for it somewhere else. So the sales tax leg of the stool, as a result, actually gets way too long. Part of the reason why is because our property and our income taxes are baked into the state constitution. This is not the way you should write your constitution. You shouldn't write a constitution 100 years ago and design your tax code for all posterity. We need our tax code to adjust to the world we live in today. So the people who wrote our tax code, actually 125 years ago into our constitution, were plantation owners, and they wanted to benefit large landowners. And as a result, they artificially capped property taxes. Then later, when we got the income tax in the 1930s, it was a time of great progressive reform. We created and designed the income tax to fund public education. The income tax was initially a very progressive tax when it was designed. It only taxed people who made higher income levels. But over the years, because it was baked into our state constitution, it became less and less progressive until we were taxing poor folks at the same rate we're taxing rich folks. So in comes the sales tax. The sales tax is the one tax that you don't have to amend the state constitution to raise. As a result, it's a really easy way to raise money when you need to raise money. And that's how we ended up with a 10% sales tax in almost every county in the state. Now, the sales tax is a consumption tax. So what it means is every single person who has to buy goods and not services, we don't tax services, which is another reason it's unfair. But when I have to go buy food, there are minute differences between the most expensive food and the cheapest food, although increasingly, I would argue that it's less and less easy to find cheap, affordable groceries. But we tax your food at 10%, whether you have $0 of income or whether you're a millionaire. Everybody's got to eat. The cost to feed a household doesn't change that much, but we're taxing the poorest person for their food at the same rate as the richest person. There's no luxury tax, which some states do have a luxury tax, so they acknowledge, hey, maybe if you go to a very high-end restaurant, or maybe if you buy a luxury car or a yacht, you should pay more sales taxes for that versus someone buying a used car off of a lot. But Alabama is just, they're all treated the same. So the other issue is that we tax food and groceries, and most states fully exempt groceries. A lot of states partially exempt groceries. We only recently started reducing the grocery tax, but that matters because you can't live without food. There's a lot of other ways you can cut your expenses. So that's why we say that sales taxes are regressive. In a balanced budget and a balanced tax code, we would rely on some sales taxes. We would try to make those sales taxes incentivize, the kind of things we want to see. Like, we don't want to tax people further into poverty. In areas that rely on, say, like tourism, they might tax certain tourist expenses more because they know that's not going to hurt their locals, but that's going to allow all the revenue coming in from this industry to benefit local people. In a state like Alabama, one of our top largest industries is timber, but we are essentially diverting tax dollars that Alabamians pay in for public education, for public goods and services, to subsidize these industries and being undertaxed. So corporate income taxes, corporate sales taxes, corporate property taxes are another way that we can make our tax code more fair. And again, we should try to incentivize smaller business, entrepreneurship, instead of diverting so much of the tax benefits to large multinational corporations, many of whom are not headquartered here, and the profits don't always stay in our communities. Right. So we have a great handbook, our tax and budget handbook on our website, that goes into this in a little bit more detail to explain why, we systematically have not had enough money for education and for public goods and services like healthcare, criminal justice reform, even roads and bridges, public transportation, because of a tax code that was baked into our Constitution over 100 years ago. It was written in the era of Jim Crow. It was written as a direct response to progressive movement organizing, to efforts to make our state more fair and opportunities spread more widely. And when you compare us to states that have more opportunity and have more equality, you find that the tax code is one of those reasons why. Yeah. It's interesting too, when we organize people, it's hard to tell people that we need to raise taxes because the average working Alabamian already gets taxed a lot through those sales taxes, grocery taxes, income. But what they're not seeing is that in other states that have more equity and have greater investment, wealthier people are paying more, and it shows up. It shows up in roads that are paved, in water that is clean, in schools that are well funded, in public amenities that are there for everybody. And sales taxes just are not a good way to fund government for another reason, because when we face a recession or an economic downturn, those are the first thing to go away. So when we most need government to step in and help out, if we're relying too much on sales taxes, or even relying too much on income taxes, those start to drop. And that's why we get hit so hard when there's an economic downturn. And so we've got our budgets that are dramatically out of balance. They're tilted too heavily towards wealthy people. And working folks should be upset about this. Like, it's not fair, and there are better ways to do it.
Robyn Hyden is the executive director of Alabama Arise, a statewide progressive nonprofit advocacy organization fighting for working and poor folks in Montgomery. Folks can be members of Alabama Arise and get updates about the legislature and things like that right in your email inbox or your mailbox. I get some mail pretty regularly from Alabama Arise. 20 seconds, how can folks get more involved in Alabama Arise if that's something they'd like to do?
Sure. 3 things really easy. Sign up for our emails on our website, alarise.org. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Blue Sky X. We post regular updates, action alerts, ways that you can get involved. And 3, connect with an event or an organizer in your local community. It's good to be connected to larger organizations if you're feeling isolated. We have members in pretty much every part of the state and almost every county. There's someone else who's like-minded, who is looking to connect and organize on these issues. So reach out to our organizers, and please connect, because we love to continue to build our movement. And we know that, not everyone has to agree on every single ideological issue, but the issues we work on are so fundamental. They're so broadly popular. It is issues that help workers and everyday folks. So we'd love to have you join us.
Robyn Hyden, Executive Director, Alabama Arise. Thank you. Going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Jacob.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. Today, we just talked to Robyn Hyden, Executive Director of Alabama Arise. We're going to be talking about the school voucher bill that passed in Texas. We are also going to be talking to a Wells Fargo worker who unionized about their union campaign and about Wells Fargo's increasing the sales pressure shady tactics. All that and more on today's program. If you want to leave us a voicemail, you can do that at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail at any time throughout the week. We'll be opening the phone lines here at 11 a.m. if you'd like to call in live, 11 a.m. Central Time. Appreciate everybody tuning in. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We have some cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us at tvlr.fm/contact. on that.
Hey y'all, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, and now Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
And with that, let's jump right into Last Week in Southern Labor. Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment that we do every week where we take a look at what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to. Here's what they were up to from April 18th to the 25th. In new union campaigns, workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the union representing 12 workers at Restaurant Technologies in Dallas, Texas. The union is unnamed on the NLRB website. 5 workers at David Taylor Ellisville Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Ellisville, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW District Lodge 9. 36 workers at Compass Behavioral Group in Midlothian, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the ABA Workers Union, an independent union for workers in the applied behavioral analysis field. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the IAMAW Local Lodge 2947 as the union representing 2 workers at the Delaware Resource Group of Oklahoma in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. 17 workers at Republic Services in Churchill, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters Local 519. 208 workers at the Washington Post in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with the News Guild CWA. 23 workers at AGL Services Company in Atlanta, Georgia filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW. 118 workers at Breakthrough Beverage, Missouri in St. Louis, Missouri filed a petition to hold a union election with the Liquor and Wine Sales Representatives Union Local 3. The IAMAW is attempting to raid a unit of 8 workers at Neil R. Gross and Company in Washington, D.C., who are currently represented by Court Reporters United. In election results, 2 workers at the Wood County Electric Cooperative in Quitman, Texas, voted 2-0 in favor of unionization with the IBEW Local 728. Another unit of 4 at the same company won a union election only 2 weeks ago, also unanimous. 18 workers at Siemens Industry in Fort Worth, Texas, voted 14-3. in favor of unionization with the IBEW Local 220. 96 workers at Nelson Tree Service in Pikeville, Kentucky, voted 30-49 against unionization with IBEW Local 369. 26 workers at Entergy in Jackson, Mississippi, voted 14-8 in favor of unionization with IBEW Local 605. And workers for Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits in 3 different work groups in El Paso and Fort Worth, Texas, joined the Teamsters, Local 745, in one day. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, a U.S. District Court in D.C. issued a preliminary injunction against the Trump administration's illegal revocation of collective bargaining rights for federal workers. Every year, the National Council on Occupational Safety and Health, NCOSH, releases a Dirty Dozen report highlighting companies that fail to protect workers on the job, with NCOSH saying this leads to preventable injuries, illnesses, and deaths. This year, of the 12 employers listed, 8 of them are in the South, including LCMC Health, which owns the University Medical Center in New Orleans, where nurses recently unionized and are fighting for a fair contract. Their union, NNU, put out a statement saying that nurses were unsurprised by the designation. Hamilton Nolan interviewed some of those workers in his newsletter. Other Southern employers include Barnes Farming in North Carolina, where a worker died on the job, E-Green Transport in Georgia, where workers won over $500,000 in back wages through organizing and legal complaints, and Marjack Poultry in Mississippi, where 3 workers have died since 2020. The AFL-CIO put out another annual report. Both of these reports released to coincide with Workers' Memorial Day, which is on April 28th. The AFL-CIO's annual Death on the Job report. Some lowlights from the report: 5,283 workers died on the job in 2023, and an estimated 135,304 died from occupational disease. That's 385 workers dying every day from hazardous working conditions. Worker safety organizations continue to be underfunded. In fiscal year 2024, OSHA had only 1 inspector for every 85,000 workers. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration did hold a Workers' Memorial Day ceremony, but it's difficult to listen to any of the officials' nice words when the administration is cutting OSHA and all of the things that could save more workers' lives. Most recently, the Miami Herald reported on how the administration is poised to scrap a proposed heat protection rule. Thousands of probationary workers filed complaints with the Office of Special Counsel, an office within the executive branch that is supposed to investigate prohibited personnel practices in the government. It is also supposed to be independent, and yet the head of the office was fired by Trump. Thousands of probationary workers who filed complaints with that office had their cases dismissed as lacking merit last week. The U.S. Department of Labor is threatening its staff with criminal penalties if they discuss cuts to the agency with the media. And the National Labor Relations Board is dropping its case against SpaceX. In strikes and bargaining updates, the IAMAW at ULA, representing 600 workers in California, Florida, and Alabama, will vote tomorrow on their tentative agreement that includes a 15% wage increase over the next 3 years. Mercedes in Alabama has unveiled a new policy to try to dissuade workers from unionizing. A team member advocate. You don't need a union so you can advocate for yourself. You need a person who works for the company who can advocate for you.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Members of the Texas State Employees Union, TSEU-CWA, rallied for a $10,000 pay increase for all workers and a cost of living adjustment for retirees. 1,000 workers at UNFI unionized with the Teamsters. In Florida, Georgia, and Illinois ratified a new 5-year contract that the union says includes significant wage increases and a pension. Starbucks union delegates voted by 81% to reject a proposal from the company because the raises were not high enough. The company was offering only 2% annually. In political and legislative updates, Alabama's teachers won't be getting a pay raise in the education budget this year, even though it is the largest ever, but they are getting some other significant job improvemements, like paid parental leave, no health insurance increases, and a new workers' compensation program. Hospitality workers in Houston, Texas, unionized with Unite Here, Local 23, are calling for a $23 an hour hospitality minimum wage in the city. Maximilian Alvarez at the Real News Network spoke to Texas residents who live near a Bitcoin mine about the negative effects it is having on their neighborhood. The Economic Policy Institute released a report on South Carolina's economic boom, where it's true that job growth has outpaced the national average, but the job quality has lagged, with workers earning less than the median salary, even as they work overtime and in unsafe working conditions. New guidance from the National Institutes of Health say that researchers will have funds terminated if they boycott Israel. I kid you not, you can boycott, as a National Institute of Health researcher, any U.S. state in the country. You can boycott any other country in the world, but not Israel. Currently, probationary employees for the federal government can only be fired for performance, but Trump signed an executive order purporting to allow firing probationary employees for other reasons as well, because that's efficient, firing people not for performance. The Trump judge says that a 2-year-old U.S. citizen born in New Orleans may have been deported without due process. The American Postal Workers Union, APWU, has a fact sheet about postal privatization explaining why it'd be bad for workers and consumers. And in internal union affairs, the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, is laying off more than half of its staff as funds dry up from the elimination of paycheck dues deductions by Trump, with national staff going from 355 workers to 150. In better news internally to unions, Jennifer Abruzzo is rejoining the Communication Workers of America as a senior advisor to the international president. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact. As always, there will be more information in the newsletter, which you can subscribe to at tvlr.fm. I believe that we should have our guest in the Zoom. What was the Britney is the name of the employee at Wells Fargo, and Britney Ball, a personal banker at the Anniston Wells Fargo branch in Anniston, Alabama, a member of Wells Fargo Workers United, CWA. Britney, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. I think you're frozen, Britney. Can you hear us? Maybe you should try coming off of video. I'm not sure if your signal is bad, but try coming off video and doing audio only. See if that works. Can you hear us, Britney?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. We can hear you now. So appreciate you taking the time. Just to start off, can you talk to us a little bit about yourself, like your background, your job at Wells Fargo, and how you first got involved in organizing your workplace?
Sure. Well, my name is Britney. I'm a personal banker with Wells Fargo. I started as a part-time teller in Los Angeles, and I moved to Alabama maybe in 2016. And from there, I became a personal banker. And I've been with Wells Fargo since 2013, the end of 2013. So a little over 11 years. So I'm a single mom. And I started working at Wells because they had a position open. And at the time, I was working in retail. So I said, perfect, maybe I can just work 2 jobs. But then they moved me up to full-time. So then I quit my second job and just kept Wells Fargo. So, yeah.
So thank you for that. Yeah, it's always helpful to kind of know someone's background there. And I'm curious, like before this campaign took off, did you ever think of yourself as a union person? Was there something that shifted for you, or was there like a moment when you realized that something has to change and organizing with the coworkers is a way to do that?
Well, so a little bit about like the beginning when I started with Wells Fargo, there were a lot of things that were not right when I started. And I had, kind of like stood on my beliefs and like saying I wasn't gonna indulge in the type of behavior that Wells Fargo was indulging in at the time. And
Right.
of course, they got caught up for that. So I made sure not to have myself in a jam by, staying true and following these policies and procedures. And that was like my first kind of like red flag, but I didn't know much, it was that lack of like knowledge to kind of like raise my hand and say, hey, this isn't right, because I really didn't know that it was wrong. With Wells Fargo, such a huge company, you would think, they're doing everything by the book, everything's, A-okay, but it wasn't. And so I had a manager who really wasn't fair. And I started going to HR and, but I kept getting muted. I kept getting turned down, or, there were never like resolutions to my problems. There were only like, well, maybe you should do it like this, or have you talked to your manager? And I'm like, I'm calling you all to see what to do, not talk to my manager. It's far beyond that.
Right.
So, there were like situations like that. And I'll give you an example. She would make comments that would kind of like, that they weren't exactly like corporate America appropriate. Like, so I'm African American and she was white. And one day she came to work, and like I would wear, my hair in different hairstyles, and she would like make little comments about my hair, or this one particular day she came and she had cornrows. She had her hair braided to the back. And she said, "Oh, do you like my hair? I look like you now." And I was like totally taken aback. And I'm like, is that something that's fair? Like, is that something that she can say? So, and I didn't even have to raise my hand. Another coworker had like said something, and of course nothing happened, but they wound up opening up a whole investigation. And with Wells, it's always like they want to like hush you or brush it up under the rug. And that's what I felt happened there. So that was years ago. So then when I moved here, it was kind of more of the same thing, but it was a little more subtle. So at this point, I'm a little more confident. I've been with the company a while. I know how things go. Right. So I would, push back and give my opinions on things that were happening. And again, going through HR, going through the proper channels, and nothing would really there was no like resolution to anything. It was always, well, we'll keep you informed. And, we've decided that there was no, like, for example, I had like a retaliation case. Oh, there was no retaliatory actions that took place. We've investigated and we considered all the facts and, all that BS. And nothing happened. So that's like one of my reasons for really like starting the journey. Because I felt like I was being silenced. And I know Wells Fargo, they're only going to look out for themselves. And I felt like no one really had my back. And like I said, follow the chain of command. That didn't work. So one day we got some mail with union information. And no, I didn't know anything about a union. I didn't know how it worked. Other than like, honestly, I thought unions were only for like construction workers or people that work for like, that do manual labor, like linemen for like power companies. I never thought that like someone like a bank would ever be like unionized,
Yeah.
So when they reached out to us, we got letters in the mail. And then Wells Fargo had like a brief like meeting with our managers in the morning, like, oh, you may get paperwork about the union and just do your research. And I'm like, okay, I just brushed it under the rug. So then we started, I think I called the number or sent the text, and then someone reached out to me and told me like what all they stood for. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. Like, I'm all for it. So as soon as, we wanted to voice our opinion on, the unionizing or the unionizing talk, we were immediately silenced. So I knew then that there's something, like I already knew that unions were not illegal. They're not illegal. There's something that Wells Fargo wants to keep from us. So that was my reasoning. I never looked at myself as a union person, or never thought I would be this far with like doing podcasts and answering questions, but here I am and I love it.
That is so interesting. And, it resonates with me a lot because growing up, I was also not a union person, quote unquote. Like, I didn't have a strong union family background. And I was like you. I thought unions were, blue collar workers, construction workers, things like that. And so that is one of the most exciting things about this campaign at Wells Fargo across the country. is it's helping show people that unions are for workers, white collar, blue collar, pink collar, no collar, whatever your job may be. If you've got a boss, right, and you work for your living, you could benefit from a union. So something that
absolutely,
so that's something that's been really exciting about this campaign. And I'm just curious. So once these conversations started and you started talking to your coworkers, y'all eventually became the first union Wells Fargo in the state of Alabama. And I'm curious, what has it been like coming together with your coworkers? Or is there any like moments that stand out, from that experience?
Well, so it's been great. I'll start off with that. It's been great. Wells Fargo has handled it pretty much as professional as they can. I don't easily scare to like intimidation. They have their tactics. They have their ways of saying, hey, we're better as one. Come to us for your needs. We don't think that a third party has to be involved. But for me personally, that hasn't worked so far. So, hey, I'm trying something different. And my point to our regional director, I told him, I'm like, if unions are so bad and you all are so against us joining a union, there must be something good that comes out of it for us, not you all, because you're here to protect the bottom line of Wells Fargo. I'm here because I want to know my rights. It's that ignorance of like not knowing that Wells Fargo preys on. They bank on that. So the more we know, the more power that we have. And if we do that in solidarity, if they see us coming together unexpectedly, then, they have to kind of go back to the drawing board. So it's kind of like, in a way, satisfying to kind of see them squirm a little bit. But my feedback from other branches, they're scared. And rightfully so, because, it is scary. Like it's unknown. It's unknown territory. So
it takes a leap of faith, right? A leap of faith in the process, in your coworkers, and the movement as a whole. And like you said, big employers or even small employers, a lot of employers, don't respond well typically when this happens. And like to your point, they think there's something they are going to lose, and they don't want to lose that at the expense of the workers. So that's really important, I think. And something that you mentioned also brings up this question for me, which is, for the people who think like we used to, that unions are just for blue collar workers, manual laborers, what would you want them to understand about why people who work at a bank could use a union as well?
Because even though like our job is not manual labor, it's still labor. They've downsized like everyone else, like every other company that I've seen over the years, especially since COVID. They have really downsized. There's not a lot of people in the office anymore working. So they're giving us more work for the same pay. And we're working. We're mentally exhausted. And it is manual labor. We're going back and forth, like with my role as a personal banker, I'm jumping back and forth between the teller line and the platform side. That's what we call the banker side. And I'm doing twice the job. And, I took on the job as a personal banker, so I wouldn't have to be on the teller line as much. To become a teller again. So that was another reason why I said, this has to stop, because I'm still obligated to meet those same metrics, those same numbers, and help the same amount of customers with two jobs, and it's almost impossible. So it's definitely a lack of a lack of empathy on their end, so we ask for more people. We ask for a certain amount of time to get things done. And they always go by something called Cloud Cord, which is like this AI system that generates how many people you need in a branch per day, which is insane, because you never really know like the traffic in the branch. And on top of that, like we have something called like losses. Like if you take so many losses or make so many mistakes, you're out of there. There's no job security, which is another reason why I decided to unionize, because that's not right. Like you can't just tell me that I have one job, but then it's kind of, you know, in the shadows. Like, okay, what really is my job, you know?
Right.
So that was another reason that I decided to speak up. And I know what I deserve. I know my worth. And Wells Fargo is a $1 trillion company. And it's definitely a slap in the face when we get these annual reports of what our CEO, Charlie Sharp, has made each year. Like, I think this past year, they gave him like I think it's like so many $1 million of a raise, a crazy number, when that should be able to go in the pockets of their workers, because we are the face of the company. They tell us that all the time. You know, right. The customer doesn't see back office, or they don't see our CEO every day. They see us.
Right.
So I think we should be like protected the most. And I don't feel like that with Wells Fargo before the union, but now I totally do.
As we're wrapping up here, you mentioned that, you know, y'all are kind of the face of the company, and something that your union has been sounding the alarm about is the toxic sales culture at Wells Fargo. I think folks will probably remember there was a huge scandal about Wells Fargo's toxic sales culture several years back. It went so far as, you know, the company forcing employees to like create fake accounts and to like really do everything that they could to try to pressure customers into products that they didn't want or didn't need, et cetera, et cetera. And your union is saying that some of that is starting to come back. Can you talk to us about the report that your union has come out with, and what are some of the things that y'all are identifying from the inside as being worrying?
Well, they definitely are bringing sales goals back. And it's funny you asked that, because I had a district manager. I don't even really know if it came from the district manager. I had a manager that told us, per the DM, we never stopped selling, which is kind of crazy, because I'm like, I don't look at it as like selling, but they have introduced new metrics, quote unquote, where there's certain numbers that you have to hit. Now, back in the day, we had specific numbers, like you get so many checking accounts, savings accounts, debit cards, online banking, things like that, then you get a payout. Now they've kind of covered that up into something else. Now there's no actual number though. So I think that's how they're kind of getting away with trying to cover it up as something else, but there's like no number. So they'll tell us like, hey, you have to do this activity, this activity, this activity. And I'm like, okay, so how many activities am I supposed to do per day? Oh, there's no number. No, there's a number somewhere. We just don't know the number. So it's like, they're kind of setting us up for failure, because it's like, okay, there's a number that I don't know about, but I'm supposed to just do the activities. But then I get called into a meeting saying I'm not like doing enough of the activities.
Right. You're being held accountable without knowing. Yeah. You're being held accountable without knowing exactly what you're even being held accountable for.
Right.
And it's, it's like, we're not going to put the quota on it so it looks, bad, but we're still going to give you the pressure behind it and pressure you to, meet those expectations. But we're not going to tell you exactly what those expectations are.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very, very, very frustrating. And so I am curious, like, y'all are making history really with this campaign.
We definitely are.
Y'all are making history with this campaign, and I wanted to give you the opportunity, like, how can folks support you? How can folks support Wells Fargo United? Whether it's in Anniston or throughout the country, because there are now 25 branches, I believe, or over 20 branches.
Yeah, it's over 20. It's about 27, maybe 28 branches and departments that have unionized.
Yeah, that's great.
And
So
that,
what can folks do to support y'all?
just stand with us in solidarity. Just tell people, like, if you know anything about a union, whether it be in banking or blue collar, just give them the facts. Let them know there's nothing to be worried about. It's all for our benefit. And Wells Fargo spreads this propaganda right now with the union stating like they're really putting an emphasis on like dues. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't been asked for a cent since I've joined. You know, I haven't been asked, you know, for anything. And I would willingly. I mean, joining a union for me is like insurance, like car insurance. You know, you pay it every month, not knowing if you're going to need it or not, but you pay for it anyways. The thing with the union is like they haven't asked me for any money, but I would gladly pay just for the extra, you know, peace of mind to know that, hey, I'm protected. And if I feel like in any way that I'm being treated unfairly or if something's not right, I can go to someone who's knowledgeable and who's going to have my back. You know, a third party who really has no like real interest in the company, but is interested in me and my rights.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you so much for the hard work you're doing, putting Anniston on the map as the first Wells Fargo store to unionize here in the state of Alabama, and for spreading this campaign, letting folks know that it doesn't matter what kind of job you have, whether you work in a bank or you work out in the construction industry, you work in a school, wherever you work, you need a voice. You need folks to come together and have each other's back. That's how you build power. That's how you protect yourselves on the job and make your life better and your family's life better. So thank you so much for appearing on the Valley Labor Report. Was there anything else you wanted to leave us with today?
No, I thank you. Thank you so much for having me this morning. And I just want to leave with one message to anyone who's in the union or thinking about joining. Don't be afraid. It's all for you. We are the union. There's no one over us telling us what to do. The workers make up the union. So anything that happens, any decisions that are made, it's us together. No one is left out.
Thank you so much. Solidarity.
We're going to take a break really quick, and we will be right back with Boss Watch. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got 40-something folks watching us on YouTube. Only 24 of y'all have liked the stream. Go ahead and like the stream. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Fern says, asks if we said Aniston, or did I mishear? Yes, you did hear right. That is Aniston. Fern was excited about us saying good things about their neck of the woods lately.
Aniston has had some of the most...
Aniston
has had both the Wells Fargo campaign, right? The first Wells Fargo bank to go union in Alabama. One of the few in the South so far. I know it's been in Florida and elsewhere, but and also, was it last year or maybe year before when we had the big New Flyer win? New Flyer is a clean bus manufacturer there in Aniston, over 500 workers, and you know, they were able to successfully organize with IUE CWA and win a good contract, and that was, you know, in a lot of ways paved. It was paved by a community benefits agreement that was there. So, you know, two really cool union victories in Aniston, and there's already, you know, pretty solid union presence in the community with the machinist and AFGE, and so yeah, lots of potential power to build there in the Aniston community. Excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and United Campus Workers at Jacksonville State. Can't forget them, right close by in the same county. So lots of union activity in Aniston.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate it always, Mel and Joe watching us on Facebook. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. 844-899-8857 is the number. We have opened up the line, so if you want to call in, you can do so now. Let's get to Boss Watch. Boss Watch is a segment that we do every single week where we take a look at what bosses are up to, particularly but not exclusively in the South. Employers are all the time breaking the law, and we want to do what we can to shed a little bit of light on that. Here in Alabama, a law firm is investigating an Alabama poultry processing company for laying off 165 people without adequate notice to employees or the state. This is coming from Hannah Denham at Alabama at AL.com. Chicago-based Strauss Borelli PLLC, a class action law firm, is investigating Alitrade Foods for the late March layoffs at its Phoenix City facility, its largest plant in Alabama. The law firm said, "We believe Alitrade Foods employees may be entitled to 60 days of severance pay and benefits." The investigation was first reported by the Montgomery Advertiser, but in a March 24th letter, a representative for Alitrade Foods told the Alabama Department of Commerce that the company planned to inform its employees of the layoffs on March 27th. The facility is keeping another 125 of its current employees, said Randy Dorset, Director of Human Resources for Alitrade Foods, in the letter. The Commerce Department's website lists the initial report date as March 28th for Alitrade's public notice. But federal law requires large employers to file a public warn notice with the state at least 60 days in advance of mass layoffs or plant closures. Those warn notices are published by the Alabama Department of Commerce. And so you can read more at AL.com, but very clearly it seems to me violating the law, laying off 165 people, mass layoffs, without the proper notice. So hopefully those employees get their 60 days of back pay. In Texas, the Results Company, LLC, a Fort Lauderdale, Florida-based business services outsourcing firm, agreed to pay $250,000 to settle a disability discrimination lawsuit filed by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the agency announced last week. According to the agency's lawsuit, the Results Company hired an employee who is blind as a telephonic customer service representative to work from its call center in Wichita Falls, Texas. After accepting the position, the employee requested to use screen reader software as a reasonable accommodation so that she could review written material on her computer screen. Screen readers convert text and other information on computers into synthesized speech. The lawsuit charged that the company did not take reasonable steps to facilitate the employee's use of screen reader software, refused the employee's suggestion that the company contact her vocational counselor and the publisher of her screen reader software to request technical assistance, and then fired her because she required the reasonable accommodation. The alleged conduct violated the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, which prohibits employers from making employment decisions based on an individual's disability or need for reasonable accommodation, and requires them to make accommodations absent an undue hardship. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas, Wichita Falls Division, after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its conciliation process. The 2-year consent decree settling the suit, approved by the U.S. District Judge Reed O'Connor, requires the Results companies to provide internal training about rights and responsibilities under the ADA and implement a plan for handling requests for accommodation from future employees who require access to screen reader technology. The director of the EEOC's Dallas District Office, Travis Nicholson, says generalized conclusions will not support a claim of undue hardship. It is important for employers to meaningfully participate in the interactive process once an employee requests a reasonable accommodation and gather information specific to the situation at hand, even if they may not be familiar with the requested accommodation. Additionally, as y'all know, so far under the Trump administration, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration is not being as public with its investigations. Last week, they did conclude a few investigations, but those were all begun under the Biden administration. Even so, workers are still dying on the job, typically 100 workers dying on the job every single week. Even though OSHA is even more hamstrung than before, there is sometimes small news stories whenever somebody dies at work, because it is such a terrible thing to happen in a community. On the Confined Space newsletter set up by Jordan Barab, a former OSHA official, they compile as many news stories on worker deaths as they can find every week. In addition to this newsletter, they regularly host commentary and analysis pieces about labor and workplace safety. This week, they found 25 stories, including 8 from the South. Just a couple of lowlights. In West Virginia, a construction worker was killed at a roadside work zone on Monday. Hold on. I lost my place.
Oh, no.
Sorry about this. Where'd it go? Here we go. Construction worker was killed in a lost it again. Where'd it go? Here we go. Okay, a construction worker was killed at a roadside work zone on Monday. A Parkways employee, identified as 23-year-old James Harper of Beckley, West Virginia, was hit by a commercial vehicle that was traveling in the southbound lanes near mile marker 92. The driver of the vehicle was identified as 28-year-old Anvar Sabirov of Rego Park, New York. Witnesses stated that Sabirov allegedly entered the marked work zone with his head down. Harper was hit while he was filling a pothole. I mean, these kinds of stuff happen all the time. It's really, really difficult. One more for you. In Louisville, Kentucky, a young man is dead after a workplace accident happened in Jeffersonville. According to a spokesperson for Incon Equipment, the incident happened around 9:30 a.m. Wednesday. The coroner identified the worker as Nicholas Ludwig. The company rents out different types of equipment like aerial lifts, excavators, and generators, according to its website. The Jeffersonville location is the company's third facility. Details surrounding the incident are not immediately available. And in the final section of Boss Watch, Union Busters, covering national union updates, sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that Union Busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. Here are last week's filings. LabCorp in California hired East Coast Labor Relations for $3,500 a day. Workers lost that union election 9-12. They didn't file until after the election, the Union Busters, that is. Premier Health Partner in Ohio hired C. Hunt Management Consulting for $450 an hour. Workers withdrew their union election petition. Amazon in California hired Keith Williams via Road Warrior Productions for $2,100 a day. In addition, the following filings were amended. Flores Labor Relations amended multiple filings with Fuyao Glass America, Canadian Solar, Mercedes-Benz, PPG Industries, and GNS North America to add their compensation of $425 an hour. And one filing for Aquarium of the Pacific to add their compensation rate of $200 an hour. If you think something should be in Boss Watch, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. We got about 5 or 6 more minutes. Adam, what do you think we should get to?
Well, I think we could talk about May Day. We could talk about May Day. It's coming up really soon.
Let's do it.
So just to let people know, the May Day Strong Coalition is organizing a national day of action for May 1st, 2025, to fight back against attacks on working people, defending public schools, unions, immigrant families, and economic justice. It frames the current political moment as a war on working people and calls for solidarity rooted in nonviolence. Major partners include unions like AFT, CWA, Jobs with Justice, and many dozens of other organizations. You can learn more at maydaystrong.org. Just to remind folks that May 1st is International Workers' Day. Around the world, it's a day to celebrate working class power, solidarity, and struggle. In the United States, of course, we have Labor Day in September, which was a conscious effort by the government to separate American workers from the international militant history of May Day. But that history is ours, ultimately. May Day was born out of struggles in Chicago, forged in strikes and blood, and reclaimed today by new generations of workers. And of course, its origins start with the 1886 Haymarket Affair in Chicago. Workers were striking for the 8-hour day. They were met with police violence. And ultimately, it became a worldwide celebration of labor power, workers' rights, and solidarity. And as I said, the U.S. government, not a big fan of that, so it moved to create a separate Labor Day holiday to pacify the labor movement after the Haymarket events. But despite that, May Day endures around the world as a symbol of worker internationalism. So this year, workers and allies are organizing a new wave of May Day actions under the banner May Day Strong. The coalition is standing up against privatization, attacks on unions, immigrant scapegoating, and austerity politics. This May Day isn't just about tradition, it's about action, fighting for public schools over private profits, healthcare over hedge funds, and families over billionaires. Solidarity is our strength across race, industry, geography, right? we, the working class, are the majority. We are the most diverse class, and so sometimes it's hard for us to unite as a majority, but the strength is in our numbers. We are the folks who make up the majority, and we create the wealth. So working people are rising again, and the South, including Alabama, has a critical role to play. And really, May Day is a reminder that every right that we have was won through struggle from the bottom up, and that struggle continues. So you can find or host a May Day Strong event at maydaystrong.org. My understanding is there's a lot of activity happening across the country. And here in the state, President Donald Trump will be visiting the University of Alabama on that evening. And so I'm sure there will be quite a few folks there to be there for that event. And I know that the UAW is holding a big rally in Chattanooga in support of the Volkswagen contract campaign. There are local organizers trying to put something together here in Huntsville at Big Spring Park. Wherever you're tuning in from, go to maydaystrong.org to see if you can find any other events in your area, or talk to your union, talk to your other organizations, see what y'all can pull off between now and then. Talk with your coworkers, your union members, your faith group, local activists, see how you can show solidarity. If you can't attend a rally or march or protest, maybe there are other things you can do behind the scenes in the lead up to the event to help out, even if it is just spreading the word. And something that you can do not just on May 1st, but every day, is follow local labor campaigns and lift them up. For example, we have workers here in Huntsville who are organizing at Starbucks to be the third Starbucks to unionize in the state. We want to lift those workers up, like the sister from Wells Fargo this morning in Anniston. These are workers who are taking on giant corporate interests. They are fighting just for basic decency, respect, and dignity on the job. And it's up to us as a movement to have their back and to show folks that an injury to one is an injury to all. We really take that seriously. And that's what, for me, the spirit of May Day is all about, is celebrating the sacrifices of workers throughout history to make life better for ourselves and our families and our future. And the fight that continues, the fight that we are in right now. We are facing really severe attacks from multiple directions on working people. Whether it's, slashing budgets, slashing state agencies, attacks on our union rights, attacks on immigrant families, attacks on, you name it, the environment, right? Everything that we care about and we hold dear is facing threats. And so it's going to be solidarity that paves our way out of this crisis. And I encourage folks, go to maydaystrong.org, find out what's happening in your neck of the woods, see how you can get plugged in and support the campaign. It's going to take people power. That's what we need to win, and that includes you. Find your role, find what you can do to make a difference. Not everyone has to be a speaker, not everyone has to be out front as an organizer, but there's something that you can do to help build a working class movement so that we can win a better future and a better world for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that, Adam. We're going to be wrapping up here, going into the second half of the program, Overtime. Find us on YouTube and Facebook if you want to keep on watching. Do we have any plugs before we wrap up?
Yeah, real quick, go to labornotes.org/events. They've got a few workshops coming up this month, including a stewards workshop, Thinking Like an Organizer. That sounds great. I'm doing a Unions 101 webinar Tuesday night, April 29th at 6 p.m. with Jennifer Shearer of the Economic Policy Institute. Really excited about that. Alabama Rise will have its legislative wrap-up on May 20th. For both of those events, go to alarise.org to find out more. And we are really proud to be on Means TV. Just a reminder that you can subscribe to Means TV with our discount code TVLR and I believe receive 20% off either your first month or your first year.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. That's it for us on the radio. Find us online, Facebook, YouTube, The Valley Labor Report. Otherwise, we will see you next week. All right, we're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. We weren't able to get to the school voucher Texas stuff in the main show, but we've got some good stuff for you. We're going to get to that in the second half of the show. Got some good clips from our friends at Left Reckoning. Also got a voicemail that we will be responding to about Social Security. Phone number is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-TVLR. We don't have a guest in the second half of the program, so if you want to call in, today's the day, 844-899-TVLR. Going to take a break, and we will be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
right. Folks, this is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio program and online news outfit in the South. Coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. You can give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857 if you would like to participate in the program. Let's talk about what happened in Texas. So Texas has all but passed a school voucher scam that's really, really problematic. I think it's going to be really bad for the state. And Robyn Hyden mentioned Alabama's school voucher scam during our legislative update. And, you know, she talked about how this is going to be ultimately a giveaway to the wealthy. And I can't remember exactly the words she used, but somebody emailed me and said that, you know, he was upset with the characterization because right now, you know, there's an income cap. And that's true. That is true right now. So I don't know if she said right now it's a giveaway to the rich. That's probably not exactly accurate.
That's clearly where it's going.
That is where it's going.
Yes. And when you have, and just to be clear, yeah, the facts do bear out that this program is subsidizing people who are already attending private school.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all those people who are attending private school are wealthy. Mm-hmm. That is true.
Yeah.
However, it is pretty clearly subsidizing people who are already in private school, which, by the way, is not really choice per se, right? You're just subsidizing their private choice with our public dollars. Right. And yes, the income cap was a very temporary thing that is being removed. So, yeah, right. I think it's pretty indisputable. If you look at the evidence across the country, state after state has tried this, and that's exactly what these are. These are meant to put more public dollars into private pockets, particularly the wealthy, and it is meant to undermine public education.
And we're going to talk about like the mechanisms by which it does that. But I want to mention that... you know, he said, I've been listening, paying attention to your show and the guests you have on as much as I can, and today's guest made me realize I'm not your target audience. And he goes on to say, because we disagree on the school voucher stuff. And I just want to say, I hope that the person is still listening. You know, I think that this is a radio person, so, you know, I'll send them the clip when we clip this. But I just want to, like, foot stomp, underline, underscore that is not true. We spend so much time and so much energy. We could just do a podcast, right? If we wanted to reach people that agreed with us, we could just do a podcast and our lives would be so much easier. It would be so, and at this point, we've been doing this radio program for 5 years. If we were to do a podcast, it might even do better online if we put all of our resources into online content and reach as many people as that already agree with us as possible, then it might even be a better product ultimately. But we don't do that specifically because we want to reach people on conservative radio stations, on liberal radio stations, on sports radio stations that don't agree with us, because we are a union first program, and unions are, you know, like one of the most kind of ideologically diverse groupings of people that you can get in modern American society. And so because we feel like the importance of reaching people who don't agree with us, we spend a lot of time and energy to raise the money to be on radio stations, so we reach people like you that may not agree with us on these other issues. And we're going to talk about these other issues because we believe that they are union issues. These are, you know, these school voucher scams We think they're bad for the community. We think that they are bad for the people who work in the schools. We think that they are bad for the children who go to public schools and the children who go to private schools. And so, therefore, we think it's a working class issue, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to try to persuade you about that. But whether we are successful in that persuasion effort or not, you are still our target audience, and we do want you to unionize wherever you're at, and that is the beauty of unions, that you can agree to disagree on almost everything under the sun, but do you agree that your coworkers and you deserve higher wages? Do you believe that you and your coworkers deserve a dignified retirement? Do you believe that you and your coworkers should have a safe workplace and not have to worry about whether or not you are going to be able to make it home at the end of your day when you clock out, right? Those are the things that you and your coworkers need to agree on to be able to form a successful and powerful and democratic and militant union, and everything else, you can hash it out. And that's what we want to do. And so we're union first. We're going to talk about the unions, and we're going to be reaching out to people who disagree with us, but we are also going to be, advocating on behalf of other issues that are outside of some workplaces. But I mean, schools are workplaces for thousands of people in this state, right? And so it's a union issue in that way, like directly, but it is also the democratic position of the labor movement, right? I mean, we're not just freelancing on this stuff, right? I mean, this is the position of the labor movement, that school vouchers are bad for our members' communities, and for our members' children, right? And so we are talking about it in that way. But, and so we're going to talk about it, but whether or not you agree with us on that, then we can still agree that you deserve a union because you deserve higher wages and your boss is screwing you over, right?
Right. And before we move on from that, I do want to say I appreciate the email.
I do.
I really appreciate when we hear from people who do not agree, because I'm 100% in agreement with you on this, and this is why we do it the way we do it, because we do want to reach the masses of working class people who are not currently convinced that organizing is the way to move forward. Mm-hmm. We want to reach people who do disagree with us on particular issues. I opened up the show talking about the climate crisis and the environment. I'm sure there are workers out there who disagree. In fact, I know there are union workers out there who disagree. That's okay. Hopefully we can have good faith dialogue about how to move things better and move things forward. But we take a working class perspective and analysis here, and that's really, the spirit in which we enter into these kind of political debates and cover the news. It's what is relevant to working class people. How does it affect working class people? What's our position in these battles, and who's winning, who's losing in terms of working people versus everyone else, the bosses and the owners. And so if you are a working class person, you're our target audience. Now, if you're a business owner, a lawyer, a lobbyist, or other, person who's not particularly in the working class, you're welcome to tune in. We don't charge. And hopefully you'll learn something and appreciate our perspective. I mean, I know that there are business owners and lawyers and other folks out there who are sympathetic with the working class. We welcome well-to-do class traders. If you are some big CEO, or you're a powerful lawyer or lobbyist or something, and for whatever reason you're sympathetic with working people, then by all means we'll appreciate your support, if you stand in solidarity with us. But that's what it's really about, is the solidarity of working people, and recognizing that there is a difference. There's a difference when we have a union involved. There's a difference when we don't talk about class, right? Because class is going to be there whether we talk about it or not. And a lot of folks in the media, especially talk radio, but in conservative media, but media generally doesn't really approach issues from a class perspective, or to the extent that they do, it's from the ruling class perspective, the owners of the media. the owners of the advertising companies, right? Not regular working folks like us, the, vast majority of people who have to clock in and clock out, who have to report to a boss, who have to sell their labor, whether it's through their mind or through their body or a bit of both, right? Most of us have to go to work for a living. We don't own property that makes money. We don't have enough money in the bank and in the investment markets to just sit on that, right? And live off that. We have to go work for wages and salaries. That's how we feed our families. And so we have a mutual interest there. We have a shared interest. We want better lives for ourselves, our families, our future. That's what it's about. So if you do disagree on certain issues, that's great. We welcome the dialogue. I mean, the cool thing about this project is that we do have a pretty diverse audience. We've had people call into the show who are conservative, people who call into the show who are communist, and everything in between on that pretty large left-right spectrum, right? And we think that's important to be able to host conversations like that and just provide a platform for working people. So, not everyone who appears on our show agrees with everything we do. Not everyone who's even donated or sponsored the show agrees with everything we do. That's okay. We try to have that independent voice for working people and call them like we see it. Doesn't mean we're always right, but we speak from the heart.
Absolutely. So let's play this clip from a Texas legislator about why he thinks vouchers are bad, which we agree with.
Private school vouchers are a scam that will take our tax dollars out of our underfunded public schools and give those tax dollars to unaccountable private schools that primarily serve the wealthy few. Greg Abbott is calling this school choice, which sounds great. I think all of us are for school choice. But this is not school choice, it's the school's choice, because private schools can deny admission to any kid for any reason they want. So how is it choice when the private school has all the power? How is it choice when a majority of counties in the state of Texas don't have a single private school in them? How is it choice when private schools don't have to provide special education services or transportation? And how is it choice when the voucher doesn't even cover the full cost of tuition at most private schools in Texas? So, I used to be a middle school teacher before I ran for office. I taught on the west side of San Antonio, which is one of the poorest zip codes in our state. If you gave my former students on the west side of San Antonio a $10,000 voucher, there's still no way they could afford a $20,000 a year tuition bill. But here's the catch. That wealthy family that is already sending their kid to a $20,000 a year private school, they're eligible for this program too. And so they're going to get a discount, a $10,000 discount at our expense. That's why I call vouchers welfare for the wealthy, and that's why I'm encouraging all Texans to call their representatives and tell them to reject this scam and fully fund our public schools.
And so, like I said, the bill has passed, and now it waits for the governor's signature, I think, is where we're at. And so this is all but done, and this is going to siphon $1 billion out of the Texas public school system next year, and it's kind of got a rollout plan like Alabama's did. It's first, prioritizing eligibility for low-income and disabled children. But then it's going to be universal. When it becomes universal, Texas could be looking at $4 to $5 billion every year being pulled out of their public school system into, like this legislator said, unaccountable private schools. And, the person who reached out to us and said that he didn't like our position on private schools, he said that, they send their child to a private Christian school because we don't like or agree with some of the things that public schools teach and push on children. And it's like, I'm a product of Alabama public schools. Not that long ago. 2015 is when I graduated, right? So I guess, a lot can happen in 10 years, but it's kind of not a bastion of woke. I'll say that. Why should other people give money to explicitly religious schools, right? Like, why should I pay for a Christian school, right? We should have a public education system that respects people's religious freedom and doesn't impose something on that. I mean, there's a First Amendment that explicitly says we should not be giving preference to a religion. And I think giving a bunch of money to a Christian school sounds, something like a violation of the First Amendment in spirit, if not in fact.
Listen.
And then also saying that you don't like public schools because you don't get a say in them. And that's just like, I don't get a say in the private school because these private schools right now are unaccountable. They're not regulated. And you actually do get a say in the public schools. You get to vote on your on the school board member and stuff like that, on the legislators, on the governor. So the idea that people don't have a say in public schools is wild. But the fact remains, when these things become universal, as they have in a few other states, the vast majority of money goes to people that are already wealthy. It does not benefit low-income students, and it hurts the system, right? If we want to talk about a way to improve the public education system, it is not by defunding it. I'm sorry, Adam, you tried to times.
There's a couple of things that stand out there. For one, I don't get to decide that the city's parks aren't good enough for me and I should go to the country club and you get to pay for it. Okay? Like, if the city's swimming pool is not acceptable for me and my family, I can choose not to participate in that, right? I can choose not to go there. But my taxes are still going to fund it. And it would be unreasonable. And I don't think anyone, except for the most extreme libertarian types, could imagine a world where I should get a subsidy or a voucher to take my family to the country club swimming pool instead of the public pool. It's just, that's not how we fund operations as a society. There's a lot of things that the police do that I disagree with, like killing people who are innocent. Okay? I know that's a hot take. I know it's very woke of me. I did go to a public school, so maybe that's
that's right.
Maybe that's what happened.
Yeah.
But, there are things that they do that I disagree with. I don't get to apply to the state of Alabama for like a home security voucher. I can't say I opt out of the police. Actually, I'm not going to participate with the police. Y'all don't have to come to my house. I won't call you. And instead, the state should give me $7,500 a year to implement my own home security system. We don't do that. Okay. Right. And so the public school system, I agree with what you're saying. It's not some bastion of propagandizing and all that, evangelizing. I just don't see that. But to your point, like, we shouldn't, if we're going to engage in this, understand that people of other faiths that you disagree with will also engage in this. People of other beliefs that you don't like will also set up their own schools and expect the tax dollars will subsidize that. So that is a problem. I mean, in the public education system, if you want me to say that it's flawed and it could be better, absolutely. I worked as a public educator. I spent over 5 years representing education employees. I've seen the dark side of, school systems. I've seen how messy it can get. I can see the politics. And is there a room for improvement? Absolutely. Should there be more transparency, more democratic accountability and input? Yes, absolutely. The solutions to all these issues, the solutions to whatever flaws currently exist in the public school system is not to defund them. Mm-hmm. It is not to take children and funding away from these schools into unaccountable private institutions, often religious institutions. That is not the answer to it, right? And I think some people are into this because, especially here in a place like Alabama, and I imagine Texas is not so different, a lot of us can think of public schools that didn't do great, right? Mm-hmm. That didn't do a great job. We can think of that. We can think of some of the issues in our current school systems and think, well, maybe an alternative isn't so bad. But it's, taking a system that is imperfect and making it worse. And it's, I think it's this vicious cycle where they tell us the schools are failing, they tell us the schools are a problem, they underfund and undercut the schools, right? So then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then they can point to it and say, see, we told you the schools were broken. That's why you need the vouchers.
Yeah.
It's a very vicious cycle, and ultimately it's not about what's good for kids. It's really, really not. It's about what lines people's pockets, whether it's contracting out inside the school systems or setting up private systems outside of it through vouchers and other means. It's never about what's actually good for regular kids.
Yeah.
Especially for the most marginalized kids who have disabilities, kids who do not speak English as their first language, kids coming from impoverished backgrounds. Those are not the kids that the private academies want, right? Maybe they'll take one or two athletes, but that's it. They're not interested in providing special education services and free lunch and breakfast. They're not interested in those sorts of things. And if there are private schools out there who do that, good for them. Still doesn't mean we should subsidize it as the public.
Right.
We have a public education system, and we should take care of that. Like, that should be the priority. It's just very, very, very frustrating to see this, because they always use children as political pawns. And having been an educator, it really, really grosses me out.
One of the things that legislator, one of the points that he made was also that, like, most counties in Texas and in every state in the country do not have a single private school option, because it is not sustainable to have little private schools in every single county.
I mean,
you just can't do that. It's not profitable.
90% of kids already go to a public school system. And, and here's another thing that they don't want to talk about in this whole conversation. Where did all these private schools that do exist come from? The 1950s and the 60s.
Yeah.
Seems like there's a correlation, right, with these segregation academies, which, now they may run from that label. But a lot of these schools, that's what they were, segregation academies. And for a lot of the people pushing this agenda, it is about segregation, whether it's segregation by race, segregation by ability, segregation by religion, segregation by class. That is the beauty of public schools, is they take every kid. The Statue of Liberty says, give me your tired, huddled masses, blah, blah, blah. Well, the public schools are about the closest thing we have to actually, like, living up to that. Because any kid who shows up through those doors is entitled to a free, appropriate public education, equitable with the rest of the kids in the building. Does it always happen like it should? Hell no. But the power of working people is how we make that better, not private profiteers.
Yeah, and I mean, that really is what's, the segregationist stuff is what was pushing this in the 50s and 60s. And now it's like anti-LGBT stuff. I mean, I've talked to basically every person that I've talked to in my personal life that is trying to pull their kids out of the public school system, or talking about when they have kids, they're going to pull their kids out of the public school system, is because of this LGBT stuff. And it's not, it's so, and, I'm going to offend people. It's not politically correct for me to say this, but it's just not the case that your kid is going to go to school and your teacher is going to trans them. What is going to happen is your teacher is going to tell your kid that they can't bully or be mean to kids who are gay, and that is less acceptable than it was when I went to high school. When I went to high school, the F slur was something that was utilized freely, and I don't think, I mean, I don't know, I don't talk to high school students, so I don't know, maybe it still is normal in some places, but that is what's happening, is that people are telling you that you can't bully LGBT folks and you have to respect them. And that is making some people uncomfortable, frankly. And, you just got to be uncomfortable. Anyway, so folks protested at the Capitol. Here's a clip of the protest in Texas. So unfortunately, didn't work, but really great to see folks protesting things like this. Left Reckoning, friends of the show, David Griscom, lives in Texas. He talked about some of how this happened, and he points out that this was not like a popular groundswell. Even as you do have folks that do get up in arms about this stuff, like it's not a normal popular thing that like normal people want to see. And so since it's not been like a popular groundswell, there have had to be other points of pressure applied to Republican legislators in the state of Texas to get them to go along with this school voucher scam. David Griscom breaks it down.
This is not grassroots or an organic demand in the state of Texas. So this election, by the way, when Abbott and all of these like school privatization advocates started running insurgent candidates against incumbent Republicans, do you know what those ads were about, Matt? They weren't about school choice. They were all about the border and how so-and-so is weak on the border. Now, again, that was a completely fabricated thing. I just can't imagine. It is, you are divorced from reality when you're talking about Texas Republicans at this point being quote-unquote weak on the border. But that's what they ran on. Those were the kind of campaigns that they ran. And it had very little to do, nothing to do with school vouchers. So again, because this is something that's not popular with Texans. When you poll Texans, overwhelmingly, they are uninterested in the school voucher scam. It was something that's very contentious in Republican districts, in the first place. And what's so worrying about this is, one, the damage that this is going to do to education in Texas, the damage that this is going to do to children in Texas, because there's no oversight here. Right? There's no oversight for all this talk of like protecting your kids and stuff that we're getting from the right. They want people in this state now to send their kids to unsupervised institutions, for-profit institutions. And I shudder thinking about all the horror stories that we're going to hear in the next few years. But anyways, this is not something that's coming from the grassroots. It's not something that's coming from Republicans. This is something that is coming from those at the very, very top and the donor class and people like Greg Abbott. And this is a Texas Republican who voted yes on the vouchers, right? Cowardly, I will add. But this is a very notable thing because it shows just how threatened these figures are. This is Jeffrey Berry on Facebook responding to a comment from a constituent who says, hey, you said you would not do this. You would not vote for vouchers if you got elected. And this is his response back to this woman, Jeffrey Berry, again, Republican ledge member here in Texas. The bill was passing regardless of my vote. If I had voted against it, I would have had every single statewide and national political figure against me. Not to mention all of my bills vetoed. The consequences were dire with no upside at all. I understand your frustration and I'm disappointed in the outcome as well. If I would have voted against this, all of my bills and appropriations were at risk. We have some great things we have already done for the district, blah, blah, blah. He also says, another person who said this, I understand your frustration. I'm frustrated too. When the president calls into your caucus meeting, says he will oppose those that vote against the bill, it is a real problem. Did you see that announcement? Which, yes, Donald Trump called into the caucus meeting in the legislature and basically said as much that, like, we will destroy you if you vote against this. And this is
and you were telling me, like, when you first read me last week what he said about that, I'm like, is he being dramatic or like what? What does he mean? He's all your stuff's gonna get vetoed, but that's actually that's actually a real threat.
No, this has happened. So this is something that I've reported in multiple places about Greg Abbott. And Greg Abbott is somebody who will veto bills out of spite. Things that you would never think that they would touch. Funding of an animal shelter, foster kid funding, all this kind of stuff will shut it down. And as shown, and remember, he's a tyrant governor. He's been governor for a very long time, and you've seen how weak the Democrats are at challenging him. The only people who could challenge him are the Republicans, and he's learned he's going to keep them on an extremely tight leash. Right? The fact that he was able to unseat people who are members of his own party, right, members of the right, have every advantage that you can imagine in politics right now, shows just how strong he has become. And yes, he was directly threatening members of the legislature that they needed to listen to him, not to their own voters.
So there you go. I mean, that's how these things are happening. And here's another clip from Left Reckoning where he talks about some of the money that helped Greg Abbott make this happen.
I know everybody likes to talk about this stuff with Texas because for some reason Texas has become a completely mystified place in most people's minds. Yeah. There are folks like Tim Dunn, the billionaire, who definitely are trying to push a kind of crazy Christian nationalist view. I'm not saying to not take that threat seriously. But what frustrates me so much is when people don't realize that Texas is also a place to make a lot of fucking money. And this is not just, now kids are going to be, having more religious education because we're pulling them out. So look, that's part of it for some folks. But the fact of the matter is that Texas is one of the largest states by population in the country. Our school system is in the billions. And that is something that is big dollar signs for wealthy people who want to make a lot of money from this. Jeff Yost, who is somebody who is who's a Pennsylvania billionaire, big-time GOP donor, somebody who's heavily invested in these school privatization efforts, both getting them passed and also, surprise, surprise, on the back end as well, right? So there's a whole host of people, these vendors, who are hoping that they're going to be able to make a lot of money by providing certain kind of materials to these schools, by outright owning these schools. Private systems mean plenty of boondoggles for private actors to take our public money. So we still have public money going into the system. We're still going to be paying taxes in the state of Texas. The difference is, instead of that money going to your public high school, right, or your middle school, elementary school, and educating this next generation, it's going to fly off to enter the bank account of some fucking rich asshole in Pennsylvania, right? This is the fundamental thing. It's all about the money. And liberals, unfortunately, I find, get really distracted because they want to talk about Christian nationalism. They want to talk about the Bible. They want to talk about all this kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong. I think that's bad. I get it. But the reason this kind of stuff happens is not because Texas has become more religious in the past 30 years. It's because Republicans have cemented and gained so much control over our government that rich people say, hey, you know what? I need to get some extra money. I might as well see if I can shake that piggy bank down there in Texas, and I'll be able to buy it pretty cheaply. Greg Abbott, he also gave Greg Abbott something like $12 million, right? It was a lot of money. But when you think about the massive returns that him and his friends are going to be able to get from pilfering, robbing our public school system, it's nothing. It's a very, very small investment. And that is the fundamental reality as to why what we're seeing is happening here. And it's why it's happening everywhere else, too.
Really appreciate that material analysis from David, because there's a lot of, it's there's a lot of, and we talked about some of the culture stuff that's tied up in this, but it really is, like most things, really grounded in what's materially going on and the material interests of actors and the wealthy. And if it weren't for that, these sorts of things wouldn't be happening as frequently as they are. Because like David pointed out, there's just not the popular support for taking money from public schools and giving them to private schools, primarily to subsidize wealthy people. So I don't know if you have anything else to say on that, Adam, but I really appreciated David and them for that segment. Thought it was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow the money. Always follow the money. And, it is unfortunate that there are folks, with beliefs that can be preyed on for this purpose, right? Because, like, the fellow who emailed you, it's not about the money for him, I don't think. I think he probably really believes that the public schools are, offending his way of life, and he's protecting his children. And I respect any parent who wants to protect their children. I mean, as a parent, we all want that.
Yes, and I just want to say also, he said he makes $25 an hour, his wife makes $18 an hour, and they sacrifice a lot to be able to send their kid to a private Christian school. And that's
a bummer. I'm sorry. I feel bad for you for making a bad choice.
I feel sorry that I think you're making a very bad financial decision, but I respect, genuinely, I do respect, like, your willingness to sacrifice for what you perceive as, like, the good of your child.
Yeah,
I
I respect people who are willing to put their money where their mouth is, and you're doing that, and I do respect that. Even though I disagree with your beliefs, I respect your conviction, because there are a lot of people who just don't believe in much of anything. But yeah, I think you're wrong. I mean, and that's just the sad situation here is I think you're making a poor choice with limited resources, and it would be easier to just talk to your kids about what you believe and be strong in that and know that, yes, they're going to be exposed to things in a public school system. They're going to be exposed to people who are different, who aren't like you, who don't think like you, who don't look like you. But that's the world. That's part of why a public education is impactful. It's not so much always just the teaching and the instruction and the standards and this and that. A lot of it is just the acculturation to getting to know people who are different from you and learn how to function with other people who are different from you and move in a positive way into the world, right? Having had those experiences, having had to get to know people across diversity, because, maybe, the goal here is you'll never be exposed to these kind of people. You'll never have to encounter, racial minorities or gender minorities or, religious minorities. And maybe you'll live a secluded life and you can do that in your own, in your small world. But I think the reality is most people are going to be dealing with folks who are different from them, and you have to be able to learn to function that way and get along with people and work with people. And so that's part of, I think one of the assets of a public education is that diversity. I want my daughter to know that there are people who aren't like us, that there are people who look different, think different, and that is, part of learning and growing up, I think. So it is unfortunate that folks don't, are so fearful of their children being exposed to critical thinking or diversity and inclusion. I mean, that really, it stings me as someone who is a father and a parent, because I don't get it, and I don't think it's the right thing to do. I really don't think it's the right thing to do, and I say that from my heart. And I respect people who think they're doing the right thing as well for their kids, but I don't think basic tolerance and acceptance, a restriction on bullying, awareness of people who are different, like these are things that are not, if those threaten your worldview, if those threaten the stability of your ideology, maybe ask deeper questions. Maybe look inside, right? Because if that's all it takes is, oh, my kid saw a book and there was a gay character in the book and now they're woke. I mean, what does that say about you and what you think and your own process of raising your children and everything? It's very baffling to me. And I don't know. I'm almost at a loss for words with some of those folks, because I don't understand it, and I don't get the fear, because it seems to be very fear-based, and I don't understand that at all, because getting to know people who are different from you, just like we said, we want to speak to people who think differently from us on this show. I mean, it's just that's part of life. I don't get it.
We got a caller on the line. Let's go ahead and bring him on the air. Caller from a 256 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Dwayne, former press secretary. Hello, Jacob. Hello, Adam. How y'all doing?
Yeah. Hey, Dwayne. Good to hear from you. What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to, since you're talking about that, Adam, and this is going to be kind of out the deep end, but I want you guys to follow along with me here, okay? All right. Now, remember, I am conservative, but I'm not conservative when it comes to social issues. Have you got it?
Okay.
Now, you know how they've done the library as far as the Christian conservative movement headed toward libraries, particularly Prattville, I want to say. What we need to think about right there is if you had to percentage-wise look at how many children were actually harmed in a library, it's not very many. Would you guys tend to agree with me on that?
I think you're right.
I would probably agree with you. I mean, I'd have to fact check you on that, but I
trust your instinct.
But it wouldn't be very many. Now, what I want to get to right here is if you look at the state of Alabama throughout a year, sometimes I would even say by the week, you have where Alabama Protestant churches did not go through what the Catholic churches did in regards to child abuse. Have you got me?
Oh, yeah.
They hid back. The Baptists, you get what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
Now, you have more actual harm occurring in Protestant churches in Alabama from youth pastors, persons in the churches that take them come to the house for a camping. Now, that is actual terrible victimization that's happening. But you don't hear them say, we need to reorganize our churches for that's no longer possible to happen. We want you to organize the library, like we say, where there's nobody even getting hurt.
Right.
In those libraries, it could be that they learned something that if they were going to be a victim in one of these Protestant churches, they would actually know, hey, I'm being victimized, instead of being ignorant to never know anything. Do you follow me there?
Yeah,
I do.
No, absolutely.
And I appreciate you bringing that up,
Dwayne. Yeah, and what I was going to say, there are terrible people. You can research for 26 children in the Florence, Sheffield area at the Highland Baptist Church for harm irrevocably for all their life. But you don't hear them going on that. There's a guy named Daniel Wayne Christ. If there had been a library across the street where these little boys would not have, they could have read about this, known maybe what this man was doing. I would rather them maybe read something in a library that stopped this than being ignorant.
Right.
And furthermore, as far as the way that they did the vouchers, it should be if you make so many hundreds of thousands of dollars, your kid doesn't get a voucher.
Yep.
If you're already there and you make a lot of money, you shouldn't get a voucher. And in order to make equal protection rights right, it should be that children that have developmental challenge problems, y'all, should get a voucher that shows if their IQ, not their IQ, but their test results and their schooling at their regular school that they go to improves them over the year. That school gets the money. Are you following me? Merit-based. You hear them hollering merit-based all the time. Well, it should be that these poor families have someone to help them fill out these vouchers, and they're for the next year. And if the school that's a public school makes these children better that signed up, they get the money, just like you would give it to a private school, y'all. I just thought that might be some ideas that I could throw out there to try to help everybody look at the situation in a different way.
Yeah, Dwayne, appreciate your call. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah, a couple things he mentioned that stood out. One is that, the public schools often have to take on cost associated with private students, right? Mm-hmm. Every year, the legislature is talking about bills that would say, oh, well, homeschool students and private school students can play sports at the local schools. They can go to the local career tech center. They can do this. They can do that. They can opt in and opt out, basically however they feel like it. And again, the public school systems are eating that cost. And then in terms of a really spicy issue he mentioned, in terms of the sexual abuse that is happening within faith institutions, that is a dark undercurrent to this conversation. And Griscom even mentioned unsupervised schools, right? Yep. And Dwayne's right. I mean, you look at it, the Moms for Liberty and these folks are going after the libraries where there does not appear to be any real victimization of children happening, just some books that people don't like, which, newsflash, go to the library with your kid. Ask them what they check out. Right. I mean, that's crazy, but to his point, you've got a lot of folks who are in powerful positions within churches, just as in any other institution, who abuse that power and victimize people. And there's not a lot of accountability. Right. There has not been this full, digging beneath the surface and trying to rectify all this. And these are some of the same institutions that say we're going to set up church schools, and you should pay for it, the taxpayer. That should give us some pause.
Well, and that's another problem with the consternation about sex ed stuff. And, like, I do believe that most of the people that have a problem with sex ed in schools, like, I don't think that they are kind of nefariously, like, rubbing their hands together, like, I'm going to prey on children. They have this view of children as innocent and, and they need to protect their purity. And so even discussing anything sexual with them is going to,
introduce impure thoughts.
Exactly. And, but the reality is, I mean, I saw some survey the other day that was like 30% of women are catcalled before they turn 11, right? And so if you are a 9 or a 10-year-old girl or boy, and you have your parents have, I mean, that's the time that parents need to start talking about this with their children. And yes, society needs to start talking about these things with their children, letting them know what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, most importantly, and like what's going on. And it makes it easier to abuse children when they have no conception of sex education. Let's talk about DOGE. So, friend of the show, Michael Yaffe.
Is that what we're calling him?
That's right. He's another radio host on one of the stations that we are on, or two of the stations. We share two stations with Michael. And he had a tweet that I disagreed with, where he was saying that DOGE is one of the most important things that the government has done in his lifetime. And I thought that was crazy. So I tweeted about it. And here he is on his radio station reading my tweet and reacting to it.
I know that the guys, Jacob Morrison and the guys with the Valley Labor Report, are criticizing me today on social media. If you want to like the Yaffe Facebook page or follow me on X at Yaffe, you can see this. It's on X. You might remember yesterday I talked about DOGE. And my main point was to criticize Congress because I like DOGE, but I think if we really need to cut spending, cut the size of government, Congress is going to have to play a role. And I said this. I said, I still believe DOGE might be one of the most important things done in government in my lifetime, but where the hell is Congress? I love everything Elon Musk has done, but he can only do so much. It seems Congress was willing to stand back and do nothing while Musk and Trump took all the arrows. With all the good work by DOGE, we still have barely scratched the surface on what needs to be cut. So my main point was to criticize of Congress, but the Valley Labor Report, which you can hear on this station on the weekends, they said this. They said, folks really do live in totally different worlds. He said, in the real world, DOGE is an unmitigated failure. No real waste, fraud, abuse found. Those are crimes. Now, I want to point out, and maybe this is what they meant, waste is not a crime necessarily. There's a lot of waste in government that was legal, but still wasteful. So I do have to point that out. He says it misrepresents what line items it has cut. It's also extremely unpopular. And I responded to this. By the way, it's not extremely unpopular. There are parts of it that are popular. The majority of people do want to cut waste and cut the size of government.
So there you go. We're going to talk about like the substance of it, but I want to spend just a little bit of time on the is it popular? And so if you ask people, should we make government efficient? Like everyone thinks that we should make government efficient. The question is, how do you do that? Is DOGE doing that? What does that mean? What does being efficient mean? Does being efficient mean you cut the size of government, or does that mean that actually that you empower government to act in the world, right? I think that's what being an efficient government means. You know, the New Deal government was an efficient government because we empowered the government to do things, to go out into the world and build. I mean, it is amazing how many public parks exist today because of the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps that was set up during the New Deal. That was an efficient government, right? And so what does that mean? But, the questions, is DOGE doing a good job? Do not poll well, because everybody is seeing that what DOGE is about is not actually about government efficiency. It's not about making sure that what government does, it can do well. It is about demolishing the capacity of the state, which is a different project than making it efficient. And people don't like that. People think if the government is going to be doing something, it should be doing it efficiently. And so here is Byron Donalds, just I'll go through a couple more poll numbers here in a second, but as a real life illustration of this, here's Byron Donalds at a super restrictive town hall event. Let me go through, just before we play this clip, all of the restrictions on attendance at this town hall. And then I want you to listen to the audience because it's pretty crazy. So this is a town hall that you had to be pre-registered for like 3 days in advance. Registration ended on Friday, April 18th for the event on Monday, April 21st. Okay. So, you had to pre-register. Only 700 tickets were guaranteed. Only voting constituents of Byron Donalds' districts were even eligible. If you are a constituent but you didn't vote, you are not eligible. Family members, guests may bring up to 4 family members from the same household. Okay, so you're not able to bring a bunch of people with you. And guests must arrive between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m. to secure their spot for an event that starts at 6:30. To be able to enter, you have to have an email confirming that you were that you were able to enter. You had to have a Florida ID matching the address in the district. And for out-of-state IDs, the team had to verify your district voter registration. Okay, so, look, this is not a bunch of paid protesters coming in from California and New York. All right, let's listen to this question that was asked and how the audience responded.
Okay, so the first question comes to us from Susan Sutton from Fort Myers. Susan?
Susan? Oh, hey Susan, how you doing?
All right, Susan, as a member of the Oversight Committee, what oversights are you imposing on Elon Musk and DOGE?
Great question. Okay.
Okay, so what the question was, if you couldn't hear it, as a member of the Oversight Committee, what oversight are you putting on Elon Musk and DOGE? Okay, and the reaction from that was very obviously that they don't like what Elon Musk and DOGE is doing. And he tries to answer this. Here's him responding in part to that question and another question about Elon Musk and DOGE.
Elon Musk and DOGE have been authorized by the President of the United States. Don't leave. Are you ready? You ready for the other half of it? The previous president, President Hyden. So you do not want to hear the full story. You don't want to hear the full story. Allow me to educate and bring you the full story. And when you're ready, I'm going to tell you, because I don't want you to yell and not hear the full story. Because you're not listening. You're yelling. Here we go. I'm going to tell you the full story.
So there you go. And like I said, we're going to get into some of the substance, but that's just to illustrate DOGE is not popular. Also, to help you illustrate, he won that district 70-30 in 2024, 3 months ago, or 4, 5, 6 months ago, right? So this is not, a bunch of New York libs. Here's some other polls. Plus 14%, like most people by 14 points think that government is inefficient. Even 6 plus 6 is the reaction to DOGE is a good idea, right? And so there is a real feeling, or there has been generated a feeling among the American public that there needs to be some sort of project to make government more efficient. And yet, even with this, like, you could not ask for a better place from which to start this project, right? If you are somebody that actually wanted to make government more efficient, you could not start from a place of more charity from the American people, right? A plus 14 point positive on government is inefficient, plus 6 point even on DOGE is a good idea, right? So that must mean something when in the same poll, people are saying, in reaction to the statement, DOGE is doing a good job, -12. -12 points, DOGE is doing a good job. -18 points, Musk is doing a good job with DOGE, right? This is in the same poll, people are saying this is a good idea, but wow, they are screwing it up. So you got to be able to reckon with that if this is actually your project. Only 30% of people say it should continue at the pace that it's continuing now. 30 people say that the idea is needed, but they need to slow down and actually, do a project of government efficiency. And then 30 to 40% of people say it's reckless, or 30% of people say it's reckless and should stop now. 4% of people say there's no need to cut the federal government. 60% of people disapprove of the job that DOGE is doing. 57% of voters, including 16% of Republicans, said that Musk has too much power in decisions that affect the country. Right? So, talk about the substance here in a second, but I think it is accurate to say extremely unpopular. If that's not extremely unpopular, I don't know what is extremely unpopular if that's not. Okay, let's continue listening to Yaffe.
Believe it or not, Valley Labor Report hasn't changed my mind. Is DOGE perfect? No. But it's putting us on a path of fundamentally changing the role of the federal government in our lives. I said the tech upgrades they're pushing is a plus as well. And so what I said to that, I did respond to that, but it was after this segment aired. And so I said that, it's not really so much about, did Yaffe change his opinion? It's, can Yaffe discern reality from fan fiction, right? I mean, that's where we're at, right? If, because it's not, I don't think at this point it's a matter of opinion. Is DOGE doing a good job? It's just do you agree with that statement or not is a reflection of your ability to perceive the world as it exists, not as you want it to be. Okay, let's continue. And it wasn't that long ago where the DOGE team members went on Fox News with Bret Baier and were outlining all of just the crazy stuff that goes on in our government. Now you can go to the doge.gov website as well and just see. Let me give you some examples of what's going on today. And this is why I think it's so important. You have this from Secretary Brooke Rollins out of the USDA. He says, at my direction, the USDA has taken action to ensure illegal aliens do not receive federal benefits by hardworking taxpayers. They also posted something from
Wow, that's interesting. Adam, did you realize that undocumented immigrants are just being given SNAP? Did you know that they were eligible for that before the Trump administration?
I hadn't heard that. I mean, well, I guess not that I'm aware of.
Oh, hold on. I'm being told that's not true.
Oh.
Actually, undocumented immigrants have never been eligible for SNAP.
Well, that's why I hadn't heard it, I guess.
Interesting. Also, a Government Accountability Office report detailing and describing improper payments that were issued under the SNAP program. This detailed report that goes through all of the ways, like how are improper payments happening? What are some ways that we can fix it? Do you know if that report was issued by DOGE?
I don't know.
It was not. It was not. It was issued by the Government Accountability Office. Was that report issued during the Trump administration or during the Biden administration?
Pretty quick to be in the Trump administration.
Well, I mean, these DOGE guys are really efficient, though.
That's true. They're moving fast. I don't know. Well, surely Trump's done that already.
No! It was the Biden administration that issued a, 20-page report on improper SNAP payments, how they happen, and how to fix it. Let's continue.
It said the Department of Justice has started cutting millions of dollars in wasteful grants. Some of the greatest hits include national listening sessions of individuals with lived experience. Now, we could also talk about what the cuts to USAID. And I will admit one thing. In real dollars, what Elon Musk has cut through DOGE isn't as much as needs to be cut. That's why I was saying Congress needs to do something, because the fact that DOGE could cut on its own, it's just not possible. But the reason why I think DOGE is more important is looking at the big picture, which I like to do. Looking at the big picture, it is at least is getting us to think differently.
Okay, let's pause for a second here. This is really interesting. I didn't look at this before, but the listening sessions that he was mentioning, that is about crime victims. So there were listening sessions for crime victims, and the goal looks like it was about how do we make sure that crime victims are taken care of, and how do we support these crime victims' families. And so that actually seems like it would be a Trump administration thing, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, from what I hear, they're really concerned about crime, right? And so conceivably, you would be concerned about the victims of the crimes, and you'd want to hear from them. You'd want to listen to them and know what their experience has been like, and how the government could be better serving them, right? That's a joke. Also, how much money was really spent on that? Like, give me a break when we spend how much on so many other things. And so, like, the whole idea of, waste, fraud, and abuse. Like, is there waste, fraud, and abuse? Yeah, but it's not the stuff you're talking about, right? You want to get into the war machine and the military-industrial complex. Now we're talking, but that's not where they want to look.
And let's dwell on this. The dollar value of the cuts has not been that much. 2% of the federal budget, $160 billion. And that is if the current estimates are true, which I do not believe they are. Let's remember that they had previously detailed an $8 million cut as an $8 billion cut, right? And folks were constantly, I mean, this is not a small thing, right? This is not a small thing. If you are constantly misrepresenting by orders of magnitude both the quantity and the quality of the things that you are saying that you're cutting, this is not something that is good for the government. And so as people continue to find out how they were misrepresenting both the amount of the cuts and actually what they were, DOGE has become less and less and less transparent, and they are making it less and less and less easy for people to actually go back and see what they're doing and see what it is actually that they are cutting. Additionally, they're saying that they have saved $160 billion, but a new analysis from a nonpartisan research and advocacy group estimated that DOGE's actions will actually cost $135 billion this fiscal year. They do this by seeking to tally the costs associated with putting tens of thousands of federal employees on paid leave, by rehiring mistakenly fired workers, by losing productivity, and more. The Partnership for Public Service is a nonpartisan nonprofit that focuses on the federal workforce. They estimate that estimate is based on the $270 billion in annual compensation for federal workforce. Calculating the impact of DOGE's actions from paid leave to productivity hits, the $135 billion cost to taxpayers does not include the expense of defending multiple lawsuits challenging DOGE's actions, nor the impact of estimated lost tax collections due to staff cuts at the IRS, which that alone is estimated to cost in uncollected revenue $500 billion. $500 billion in lost revenue because of the IRS staff cuts. Let's continue.
Important branding to look at a lot of stuff that goes on in our government, and we have to ask ourselves, why? Why do we have all this stuff? And a lot of what they're cutting and a lot of the efficiency they're doing isn't necessarily about cutting real dollars. It's just about cutting stuff the government doesn't need that just screws up our economy or whatever it is. But they've also talked about how some of the computer systems that these bureaucracies use are old and outdated. We talked about how when it comes to retirement, it takes months for a government employee to retire because they have to get documents and put it in Iron Mountain and all that, and that needs to change, needs to be upgraded. All of that I think is good, and I think it's important.
So, it's good to make systems more efficient, but a lot of times that actually takes, and to update files and stuff like that, but that actually takes initial expenditures to be able to move from systems that currently work to new, more efficient systems, importantly, without disrupting service. Because, what he did at Twitter, I think is very obviously has affected the, the ability of the platform to work as a platform. It's much more glitchy than it used to be. But ultimately, if Twitter is more glitchy than it used to be, that's not a big problem. If people don't get their Social Security checks, that's a big problem. And that's actually why, like the Social Security Administration, for example, did not update its files because, and one of the things that they were talking about at the beginning of DOGE was, there's 140-year-olds collecting Social Security. It's just simply not true. It's simply not true. The only reason that it looks like there are people in the system that are 150 years old is there's like some COBOL is like the coding language that the Social Security Administration uses. And so whenever they don't have a birth date for somebody or a death date for somebody, that it like defaults to this date that's like 150 years ago. But the Social Security Administration automatically stops payments at 120 years old. And the Social Security Administration's improper payments are something like 1%. It is ridiculously low. And they knew that there were people that had died that were in the Social Security system that were not getting paid. Most importantly, these people were not getting paid, but their name still showed up in the system. And what was determined, like people knew about this, but it was determined that it would be less efficient to actually update the files because they weren't getting paid. They were never going to be paid because you can't issue payments to people that are over 120 years old in the system. And so it was just more efficient to just leave them there because they didn't realize that there would be somebody who would go out in bad faith, fearmonger about this kind of stuff, right? So if you actually just want to update just for the sake of having a clean file system, you have to have appropriations from Congress to do that. And they don't have, the Social Security Administration wasn't able to do that with the operating funds. And, speaking of, like, what is the mission of DOGE? I posit that the mission of DOGE is actually just simply to undercut state capacity, to make it more difficult for the government to be able to inhibit people like Elon Musk, to make it easier for people like Elon Musk to get away with tax fraud and things like that, right? And so if that is actually the mission as opposed to making the government more efficient. What you would anticipate when they come in is not questions about the systems and technically how do these systems work and learning from people. You would anticipate questions like how people were interrogated at the IRS. This is Maurice Vinton, who used to work at the U.S. Digital Service, which is what was turned into DOGE before the Trump administration. And this is how she said that the DOGE people interrogated folks at the IRS and the U.S. Digital Service in an interview with the Majority Report.
All 162 USDS employees were brought in for 15-minute interviews. So we were kind of that first trial run of what it's like to interview 162 people in a day. And the people, we were told these are new teammates that are excited to meet us. And what we were met with was people who would only provide their first names. If you'd ask a follow-up question, like, what brings you to government? This actually happened not to me, but to my coworker. They were told this is a one-way conversation only. I mean, that's not a very threatening question. What makes you excited to be here? So that first set of interactions really set the tone for this new.
What kind of questions did they ask you?
Oh, they were, who is your favorite person at the U.S. Digital Service? Who's your favorite teammate? What makes you exceptional? What's your favorite product that you've worked on in government? It was so quick, and also the questions didn't, to me, really seem to be with people who understood what they were getting into. And government is, as you said, complex. There's a lot of systems, there's things to know. And asking me who my favorite teammate is doesn't really, I think, talk to the scale of the complexity of what we were trying to do and, what we do every day.
Was it your sense that they were looking for social networks so that in the event when I hear those questions, it is almost like a bizarro world union organizer. Because sussing out the social networks there, who are the people that I can, where are the, once I establish some type of marker, maybe it doesn't come from you, but if I know that you're friends with, Bill and Mary, and I find out from Mary that she likes NPR or something, then I know that Bill and you may be a problem.
That's a really great question and a really great theory I'd never really thought about or we discussed. We didn't really know what the purpose was.
So I think that's interesting and should inform like how we perceive how these people view their mission, right? Do they view their mission as actually improving government, making it more efficient, empowering civil servants to do their jobs, or do they see it as destroying the state? I think that should inform how we view these people. And another thing that should inform is what products and what services they try to cut. Vinton talks about some of that here.
When I joined the IRS as a detailee on loan from USDS in 2022, all of my IRS colleagues talked about was how little capacity they had or ability they had to answer the phones. Only 12% of phone calls were answered. And there were these front page that year. There were these front page stories in national news with photos of paper backlogs of people's tax returns at processing centers in the Midwest. And with the Inflation Reduction Act, there was a lot of hiring, a lot of new technology investment that went to reduce that paper backlog and to increase the ability for the IRS to answer calls. And we got it up to 88% the next year, which is heroic that even was possible. So when you ask what they're cutting that capacity. I really worry about what it's going to look like next year during filing season, what the wait times are going to be. This year, a lot of the filing season efforts were kind of held off from the initial probationary firings, but I know that there are rifts coming now that filing season is over. And sorry. reduction in force. So that is the process by which people are being fired or placed on an administrative leave. So not working, laid off. So I worry about next filing season. That's on the taxpayer side. On the call center side, when you get to the higher audits, go ahead.
Yeah, before we get to the audits, I just also want to make it clear that when the response time, when the backlog increases, when the phone calls don't go answered, that is a cost borne by the citizen. And to be clear, it's a cost borne by the people probably in the top 75 percentile of earnings. Above that, they have accountants who are waiting on the phone. They have, H&R Block that's waiting on the phone, or they're not having to do it. So the cost associated to, wealthier people is less. It doesn't inhibit their productivity. They don't have to take time off from work. They don't have to use their day off or whatever it is.
That's exactly right. I mean, I remember I was at a shop in Pennsylvania, and a woman said, she didn't know where I worked. She was just talking to her friend and said she'd been on the phone on hold for 7 hours the previous day, and she had to finally hang up. So that's an example of what it was like. And there were plans to have better technology to make it so that it was less reliant on, so many call center agents. There are ways to make it all more efficient, and we were all going in that direction. But unfortunately, never got there. And that capacity and that team has been cut on the compliance side. So effectively what the Inflation Reduction Act did was to kind of rebuild a whole bunch of the capacity to go after and to explore those larger, more complex cases. Obviously, it did happen, but not at the scale and the pace of which these large corporations or high net wealth individuals were growing. And those were there were probationary firings in February. Roughly 7,000 people were let go. Probationary means they were new, right? So new talent hired in the last 2 years.
New talent or promoted talent.
Yes. So you're like, your brand new excited teammates, and also the ones that had achieved a lot of really great work. Within the IRS, the teams that do that auditing, it was 90% their teams that were impacted. So of the 7,000 people, roughly 6,700 were fired during the probationary firings. And I expect that ratio to continue as they go through more layoffs. So it's just, I don't know what next season is going to look like in terms of, the call center, but also in the IRS's ability to explore those large cases.
90% of the departments that do these large cases, auditing wealthy people like Elon Musk, have been eliminated. How do you hear things like that and still believe that this is a good faith project? I really don't understand that. And here's another illustration, staying with the IRS. The direct file program is another thing that the IRS is moving to eliminate. Let's listen to how she describes the direct file program and what's happening there.
So DOGE has indicated that they want to shut direct file down. And that has been devastating news. It was reported by the AP last week that is their intent. They've not confirmed that, but it was definitely where the conversation was going when I was still inside, actually, frankly. And unfortunately, that continued. Again, there didn't seem to be a lot of logic behind it. Direct file is a startup. It is a startup within government. We thought that there would be some interest there. Maybe there was a Venn diagram of efficient products that people love, interest in that, and there wasn't at all, apparently. So it takes a lot of trust with states, a lot of relationship building with states, and there had been no conversations with states as well. So unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be another line item that they've just decided to cut. And the direct file team, I'm not sure what their future is. They don't know what their future is. And, it's really just devastating for not just taxpayers. I think it's also devastating for the IRS itself. That team was so talented, is so talented.
Do you have a sense of how it worked this filing season?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the Net Promoter Score is a very common private sector kind of promoter or score index that says how much people like your product or not. So last year, direct files was plus 74. It's astronomically high. Apple's is 72. Wow. This year it was 84, plus 84. So somehow the Net Promoter Score, which was already inordinately high, got even higher. Direct file users, it increased their trust in the IRS by 86%. So you can actually increase trust in government when you deliver really great things that they love. So it went really well this year. There were no bugs. Everyone that used it loved it. Some of the feedback that people gave.
That's amazing to me. Yeah. That is amazing to me. In the best of times that you would have a product rollout that was so effective. Yeah. But I would imagine that everybody associated with that was preoccupied to some degree with the idea of like, is this going to exist tomorrow? Do I have a job tomorrow? Am I at 8 p.m.? Am I going to get a notice that I'm fired? And yet the thing was that successful.
You're absolutely right. That's what it was like for that team all filing season. And people were openly speculating. Elon Musk had tweeted a confusing tweet in February that led some people to believe that direct file had been shut down. It hadn't been shut down. It was doing great. And so all throughout filing season, the team just had to focus on delivering more features. They rolled out. So an internet meme had always been, why doesn't the IRS just tell me how much I owe? Instead, they ask me, I get it wrong, and they throw me in jail. And the direct files team started to input what the IRS knew about you into the tax return. It started to do that pre-population, and people loved it, and it worked. The IRS was using that as a use case for its modernization efforts. And so it is just really, that happened during filing season. So it's just really a devastating situation for the team and for taxpayers.
I mean, seriously, IRS direct file, just to explain a little bit more about it, that just means you don't have to go through like H&R Block or TurboTax or anything like that. That is such a common sense thing that it is absurd that it is not the standard, right? Why should I have to pay a private company a bunch of money to do my taxes for me when the government knows how much I owe it? Like, why can't the government just tell me? If you cared about an efficient government, you would do that. You would just have the government tell you what you owe it. And the Biden administration was trying to do that. And you would think that if Elon Musk actually cared about an efficient government, he would be supporting this program, but he doesn't care about that. He wants to destroy the government. So, here's a couple of other things that the DOGE team has cut. USAID, I know that people don't like USAID, and people don't like you bringing up that children have died because of it, but it's true. Abdo, an 18-month-old boy, had been rushed to a clinic, this is in the New York Times, had been rushed to a clinic by his mother as he was dying. His ribs protruded from his withered body. The next day, a doctor laid him out on a blanket with a teddy bear motif, his eyes closed. Like the other 11 children, Abdo starved to death in the weeks after President Trump froze all U.S. foreign assistance, said local aid workers and a doctor. American-funded soup kitchens in Sudan, including the one near Abdo's house, had been the only lifelines for tens of thousands of people besieged by fighting. So that's another thing that they've cut. They've literally killed... I mean, you can think that's not politically correct or that's like improper or uncouth of me to say, but it's true. Elon Musk's DOGE has killed babies. They've also cut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which protects people from financial scams. It returned $20 billion directly to consumers that had been defrauded from them. And who knows how many billions of dollars it saved. And of course, we're looking at $500 billion less in tax collections this year because of the layoffs from the IRS. And so all of this is becoming less and less popular. People are becoming more and more frustrated with what Elon is doing, frustrated with the lack of respect that he has for our nation's civil servants. And so he's looking to step back. Let's play this clip.
The large slug of work necessary to get the DOGE team in place and working in the government to get the financial house in order is mostly done. So I think I'll continue to spend, a day or two per week on government matters for as long as the president would like me to do so, and as long as it is useful. But starting next month, I'll be allocating far more of my time to Tesla.
So there you go. Starting to crumble. And, it really is amazing that he's talking about, the large slug of the work has been done. And it's like, you started with a $2 trillion goal, and then you went down to a $1 trillion goal. And now you're saying maybe we'll hit $160 billion by the end of the fiscal year without, evidence of that, right? So, unmitigated failure is just to wrap this up and put it, call back to my assessment in response to Yaffe. The DOGE committee is an unmitigated failure, and it's starting to fall apart. And, whether or not you agree with that sentiment is not so much a reflection of, what is your opinion as can you perceive the world in which you exist? The AFL-CIO every year puts out a death on the job report. And it analyzes the numbers from 2 years back of people dying on the job, how people are dying on the job, who is dying on the job, where are they dying on the job. It really is. It's like a 300-page report. It's amazing. Who knows how much work goes into this stuff. So really recommend checking it out. They put it out every year in conjunction with Workers' Memorial Day, which is on April 28th, which is a day set aside to remember folks who died on the job or from workplace hazards and to fight for people to not have to go through these things again. In their report, they had some highlights or lowlights from 2023. In 2023, 385 workers died every day from hazardous working conditions. 5,283 workers were killed on the job, and an estimated 135,304 workers died from occupational diseases. The overall job fatality rate did decrease to 3.5 per 100,000 workers. But workers of color die on the job at a higher rate. Black and Latino worker job fatality rates are disproportionate compared with all other workers, and they continue to remain high. Employers reported nearly 3.2 million work-related injuries and illnesses, a decrease from the previous year. At least 55 workers died from heat on the job, a 28% increase from 2022. Fatal and non-fatal data are an undercount of the real problem. Workplace homicides continue to be a significant problem, even though they decreased 12% since 2022. Workplace suicides increased by 5% from 2022. Separately, unintentional overdoses at work decreased by nearly 5% from 2022 to 2023 due to increased attention paid to and efforts to combat the opioid crisis. The rate of serious workplace violence injuries has increased to 4.3 per 10,000 workers. Musculoskeletal disorders from repetitive motion injuries continue to be a major problem, accounting for approximately 28% of all serious work-related injuries and illnesses in private industry. Underreporting of all workplace injuries and illness is widespread. The true toll of work-related injuries and illnesses is 5.2 million to 7.8 million each year in private industry. Chemical exposures continue to plague working people, leading to debilitating, life-threatening diseases that are totally preventable. And the cost of job injuries and illnesses is enormous, estimated at $174 billion to $348 billion a year, an undercount of the real impact on society, families, and communities. They also highlight resources in 2023, which is part of fiscal year 2024. So OSHA resources in fiscal year 2024 are still too few to be a deterrent. There are a total of 1,800 inspectors, 768 federal and 1,034 state, to inspect the 11.8 million workplaces under the Occupational Safety and Health Act's jurisdiction, covering 161 million workers, a workforce that keeps growing while OSHA staff numbers do not. Federal OSHA has 85 fewer inspectors than fiscal year 2023, only enough to now inspect workplaces once every 185 years. And state OSHA plans have 12 additional inspectors compared to fiscal year 2023. There is one inspector for every 85,000 workers. And the current OSHA budget amounts to $4 available to protect each worker. Penalties in fiscal year 2024 are still too weak. The median penalty for killing a worker was $16,000 for federal OSHA. The median penalty for killing a worker was $7,000 for state OSHA plans. And only 137 worker death cases have been criminally prosecuted under the Occupational Safety and Health Act since 1970. The AFL-CIO sent me a couple of Southern top-line numbers. The report finds that agriculture, forestry, and fishing and hunting industries had the highest fatality rate in 2023. The Bureau of Labor Statistics found that Southwest Alabama was ranked number 5 on a list of non-metropolitan areas with the highest concentration of these jobs. The top 4 were all on the West Coast. And all 8 states that had a fatality rate that was higher than the national average, but a reported injury and illness rate below or equal to the national average, were all located in the South. Those 8 are Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Texas, North Carolina, and Alabama. So Alabama and all these other states have a higher than average fatality rate at work, but a lower than average reported injury rate.
Well, that doesn't add up.
Mm-hmm. And so one interpretation of that data is that maybe for some reason, when an accident happens on the job in these states, it's more likely to be dangerous, which it's more likely to be fatal, which could be the case potentially. I think the explanation of that data that makes more sense to me is that these states all have more lax attitudes towards business, and so businesses are just able to get away with not reporting accidents when they don't kill somebody, unlike in other states. That's, I think, what makes the most sense to me, right? Because it's difficult to get away with something like if you actually kill a man, right? If you kill a man, it's kind of difficult to sweep that under the rug. But if somebody, hurts their back or even cuts their finger off or something like that, it's a little bit easier to hide that, especially if you don't have enough people like as the decreased state capacity in the South would indicate. So that's kind of my explanation of the data. Of course, I'm not a data scientist, so take that for what it is. But really harrowing numbers, and really it's not necessary. Like, that many people do not have to die. We can have safer workplaces, but it's going to take people organizing, building unions, building strong unions that are able to fight back against their employers' willingness to cut corners for profits, and it's going to take legislation and increased state capacity, not decreased state capacity. We need an increased state capacity to be able to bring these employers to heel. That's what we actually need to do. We need to rein in the owner class because they have too much power. They are too easily able to skirt regulations. They are too easily able to endanger the lives of working people. And we have to put a stop to that.
And Jacob, I'll just add a couple of things to that, and hopefully we'll have an op-ed out in the next couple of days. But in terms of Alabama specifically, as you pointed out, Alabama is one of the more dangerous places and has some of the weaker protections. And Alabama still refuses to extend basic OSHA protections to more than 300,000 state and local government workers.
Yeah.
That means the folks who fix our roads, care for our children, and keep our public services running can be sent into unsafe conditions without legal recourse. And, you know, when I was doing research for this op-ed, I found case after case after case after case here in the state of Alabama. Toxic chemicals, extreme heat, dangerous equipment, fatal falls, punishing hours. There was the Phoenix City sawmill, which was called by the Washington Post the most dangerous workplace in America. And a 2023 fatal accident investigation revealed for the second time in 3 years that the employer could have prevented a tragedy by following required safety rules. A man who gave 20 years to the company suffered a gruesome death. And, you know, to expand a little bit broader, we know that children face real danger in the workplace. There's a reason we fought as a labor movement to win child labor laws. And we've seen those child labor laws being weakened across the country in recent years, especially coming out of the pandemic. Employers were griping that no one wanted to work anymore. They couldn't find workers. And so, hey, what about all those kids? What about all those children? They're not in the workforce yet. We could fix that. And the state of Alabama, there is one guy tasked with enforcing child labor laws. Right now, of course, there's the federal folks, and as you've established already, there's not enough of them, right? So the state government in Alabama employs one gentleman to police child labor in the entire state. And that's despite the fact that we know there have been illegal child labor cases here in the state of Alabama. And what I think about is how many stories, like you mentioned with this, the discrepancy between the fatality rate and the reported injury and accident rate, how many stories of workplace injury and illness will we never know? Right? How many never make it into these reports, never make it into the data? How many stories will we never know about? Because behind every statistic is a community that's forever changed. Children growing up without a parent, spouses who are burdened with grief and medical debt, families hollowed out by preventable loss. The human cost of unsafe work ripples far beyond the job site. And there is a proven solution. We talk about it every week. It's called unions. Unionized workers are significantly more likely to have safer workplaces, right? Because we have the power to speak up with less fear of retaliation, the strength to negotiate for better conditions, the strength to win better safety protections, ongoing training, etc., etc. So a strong labor movement means safer jobs for all workers, union and non-union alike, by raising standards across industries and communities. It's no accident that the lower the union density in a state, typically the worse the safety is, right? We know for a fact that right-to-work states are more dangerous as a worker than non-right-to-work states. So there's a lot to be said there, and I guess the federal context right now, you know, you've got legislation that could be passed, but nothing's moving on it. There's a bill out there that would protect all workers, regardless of who they work for, where they live. It's not gone anywhere in years. It gets put up, you know, nearly every year. We've got OSHA and other safety agencies that already were lacking the resources and authority to do their job. Now, the White House is aggressively slashing funding and enforcement, which puts workers in even greater danger of reckless employers. We've got to defend institutions like NIOSH, the National Institution for Occupational Safety and Health, the Mine Safety and Health Administration, right? There are attempts right now to gut their budgets and erase their missions. And these agencies, however inadequate they've been, to think that we as working people will be better off without them is wild. And I just want to say that really workers shouldn't have to risk their lives to put food on the table. And we have to reject that. We have to reject the idea that dangerous jobs are just part of life, right? Especially here in the South. Our workers here in the South, here in Alabama, our workers deserve the same dignity, the same protections, the same enforcement as workers anywhere else.
Yeah. Let's do one more. We're going a little bit long, but I want to get to this. We had a voicemail, and I wanted to make sure that we responded to it. So I'm going to go ahead and play this voicemail. If you want to leave us a voicemail, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-TVLR. You can leave us a voicemail at any time. Here is a voicemail about Social Security Month.
Hey there, Jacob and Adam. This is Gus from Portland, Oregon. I have been working in homeless supports and anti-poverty kind of work for about a dozen years now. Today, I had a coworker who helps the folks that we're working with apply for Social Security. And she was showing me an email that she got from the Social Security Administration. And I just kind of, to set up this story, have been thinking a lot about like all the cuts that agency is facing, all the delays that I hear about from my coworkers who are doing that work. And apparently April is Social Security Month. And the email that she got was about how Social Security Month had been discontinued due to COVID at the beginning of the pandemic, and how the Biden administration had not brought Social Security Month back, but that Trump now thankfully is bringing it back. It was just a funny, goofy story to see an email that was just this like petty dig about how, like, in the midst of the cutting of these services, the cutting of, these benefits, like, hey, we have a month where we celebrate Social Security. Yeah, it was just a petty, goofy thing, and I wanted to share it with y'all. Hope you have a wonderful day, and all power to the workers. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Gus, for the call. Again, if you want to leave a voicemail like he did, 844-899-8857. So I looked into this, and it is true. On April 22nd, the Social Security Administration declared that it will renew its observation of National Social Security Month every April. This year's campaign will go on till August 14th. That is a long month. But, I'm not opposed to that. I love Social Security. In commemoration of Social Security's 90th birthday, the campaign was last held in 2019. According to Social Security Administration leadership, the reinstatement indicates a significant alteration of agency priorities. Quote, President Trump has promised to protect Americans' hard-earned Social Security benefits so that all eligible individuals can access them, said Acting Commissioner Lee Duddick. He said that the Biden administration promoted a radical and wasteful DEI and gender ideology, and that this was to blame for long delays and subpar service. The SSA says in the same press release that it has removed bureaucratic obstacles and recalled remote workers to offices full-time. The combined savings from all these measures is estimated to be over $1 billion, it said. In March, the SSA announced major staffing cuts, and I'm reading from a news report, announced major staffing cuts, which, according to experts like former Social Security Commissioner Martin O'Malley, could lead to an interruption in benefits. And this is true, and it's crazy that they're just going out and saying this stuff, because what is actually happening is that wait times are increasing. There has been, from 2024 to 2025, a 50% increase in call wait time. And that is the opposite trajectory of the trajectory that it was on under Martin O'Malley and the Biden administration. They were decreasing call wait times under O'Malley, and they are increasing now, which is like totally obvious. If you cut workers, it's going to take longer to get stuff done. And there are people that are upset that get triggered by people recognizing that this also amounts to a cut in benefits. Because they're cutting staff, they're not cutting benefits. But actually it is, because if you are eligible for Social Security benefits and it takes you even just 1 month longer to get those benefits, that is a cut of what? $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to you that you were owed, that you did not get because of the inefficiency of the Trump administration's Social Security Administration. Right? And so recognizing that that is an actual cut to your benefits, you know, it hurts some people's feelings, but it's true. And there was also reports that the Social Security Administration's already fragile computer systems are suffering more glitches than usual. One breakdown recently resulted in the agency sending an erroneous message to millions of recipients that said their payments had ended. That doesn't sound like, you know, but that's kind of the move, right? Like if you're not actually trying to invest in these programs, if you're not trying to actually make sure that people are able to get their benefits, then you just go around and talk about how you're trying to make sure that people get their benefits instead of actually doing it. So there you go. Gus, appreciate the voicemail and appreciated the opportunity to talk about how insane that is. Appreciate everybody tuning in. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. You can leave us an email, tvlr.fm/contact. I don't have anything else, Adam, do you?
Just want to remind folks to leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we will play that, right? We had Gus and Debbie today, and appreciate them calling and letting us know what's going on in their neck of the woods. And again, want to remind folks, labornotes.org/events. You can find some really good trainings coming up. A few of those that are coming up. Let's see if I can get my notes pulled back up here. I know they have a steward's workshop on thinking like an organizer. That one is going to be in May. They also have Winning a Strong Contract, parts 1 and 2, starting April 30th. What to do when your union breaks your heart, May 6th. And go ahead and save the date for May 31st as the New Orleans Troublemaker School. So that's really cool. And again, want to remind folks that I will be doing a Unions 101 webinar on Tuesday night, April 29th at 6 p.m. You can go to alarise.org to find out more. That's a partnership with Jennifer Shearer of the Economic Policy Institute. And obviously it'll be, you know, from an Alabama perspective, but it is not exclusive to Alabamians. You know, wherever you're tuning in from, if you're interested, please do check it out, and, you know, feel free to share with folks, whether it is curious workers or maybe you have some, you know, political activist types who are supportive of labor but don't really know a lot about it, or maybe just, you know, regular folks who don't really know anything about unions but might be curious to learn more, or even opponents. If you know someone who hates unions and maybe they're just curious enough to hear the other side, they're welcome as well. And as we discussed, April 28th is Workers' Memorial Day, and May 1st is International Workers' Day. So big week coming up, lots of actions happening across the country. Again, you can go to maydaystrong.org to find out about events on May Day that are happening in your neck of the woods. We are really proud to be on Means TV now, and we officially joined last week. You can subscribe to Means TV with our discount code TVLR and receive 20% off either your first month or the entire year. And I usually do it by the year when I'm able to, because it's easier that way, and it's worth it. It is really worth it. I'm a big fan of Means TV. I've been a longtime subscriber, so really excited to be part of that project and collaborating with them, and look forward to the partnership. And if you're not already on our email list, definitely do that, tvlr.fm. We send out Boss Watch and Last Week in Southern Labor as newsletters, and hope folks will get something out of that. that's all I have. I really appreciate everyone tuning in today. Thanks for all the support. As always, we can't do it without you. This is a grassroots media project, and we rely on your donations and your support and your likes and subscriptions and all that kind of stuff. We rely on that to move forward and keep this thing running. So thanks for everyone tuning in today. Thanks for the calls and engagement, as always. And just want to give a shout out to everyone who is doing something on May 1st. Be safe and solidarity forever.
See you next week.